the ice and fire demon god of Hogwarts. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 676, The Ultimate Test of Human Alchemy. At the same time, the Magical Congress of the United States of America. Unlike the Ministry of Magic in most countries, which is hidden underground, the Magical Congress of the United States of America is located in the Woolworth Building. When the Magical Congress of the United States of America employees go to work, they even go to the Woolworth Building with the no-maj they call. In a sense, the base of the Magical Congress of the United States of America can be said to be hidden in the city. Under the Woolworth Building, there is also a space expanded by the Magical Congress of the United States of America using the traceless extension charm. However, unlike the open office space in the Woolworth Building, the space under the Woolworth Building is used for some shameful research. For example, human alchemy. In a laboratory about the size of two Quidditch pitches, which was expanded by the traceless extension charm, many alchemists in black uniforms are walking among the old chemical equipment. With a bit of excitement in their eyes, they look at the center of the laboratory, a computer like all chemical equipment. Jose has the alchemy chip that can carry the consciousness of a wizard been successfully made. An alchemist in a black uniform walked quickly through the crowd and came to the slightly younger alchemist who was operating the computer-like alchemy equipment. The young alchemist named Jose, who was also wearing a black uniform, turned around, his face full of excitement and joy. Jose said happily, "Success. Mr. Henry. We succeeded," Jose said as he clicked several times on the operating table of the computer-like alchemy equipment. As the magic power fluctuations spread, the surging magic power was absorbed by the computer-like alchemy equipment and converted into more refined computing power for making the alchemy chip. A series of rumbling sounds came from the computer-like alchemy equipment. Inside the computer-like alchemy equipment, there seemed to be a structure similar to a photolithography machine. Dazzling white light bloomed from the gaps in the alchemy equipment. This noisy rumble sounded like the beautiful sound of nature to the ears of hundreds of alchemists in black uniforms in the laboratory. They knew that this was the result of their research for decades or even hundreds of years. After about 15 minutes, a 5-inch old chemical chip slowly came out of the old chemical equipment. An alchemist named Kyosu came forward, picked up the old chemical chip, put it on the detection instrument, and scanned it several times. Finally, Kyosu raised the old chemical chip in his hand, turned around, and said loudly to his colleagues, "Everyone, our old chemical chip has been successfully developed. Whether it is the chip load limit or the compatibility with the old chemical armor, it has met the requirements." Hearing Kyosu's words, all the alchemists in black uniforms cheered. However, Kyosu's expression turned serious again, and he said, "But our old chemical chip has a great disadvantage." Hearing this, everyone quieted down and waited for Kyosu's next words. Kyosu said in a deep voice, "According to the test results, after the wizard uploads his consciousness to this chip, his consciousness will be completely fixed, or in other words, his thinking will be completely anchored. That is to say, the consciousness uploaded to the old chemical chip will not be interfered by any external factors, but it will not make any progress. It's like a child who uploads his consciousness to the old chemical chip will always be a child. Even if he has decades or even hundreds of years of experience, he is still a child. His consciousness will not improve, but it will not wear out. This is a double-edged sword for us." Kyosu said so. Hearing Kyosu's words, everyone thought about it. After a while, a questioning voice appeared, breaking the silence in the laboratory. "A consciousness that will not improve and is always anchored. Is it really a human consciousness? In other words, is the consciousness uploaded to the old chemical chip a person? Or a memory aggregate?" The appearance of this questioning voice caused many alchemists to think. But soon, different opinions appeared in the laboratory. "But, isn't our goal to create a mechanical army that is forever loyal to the Magic Congress and immortal? Yes, in that case, then no matter whether the consciousness still belongs to a person or is no longer a person, but a memory aggregate, what does it matter?" Even if the wizard who uploaded the consciousness has died, as long as he is willing to be loyal to the Magic Congress of the United States at the moment of uploading the consciousness, then no one can shake the idea of the possible memory aggregate, right? Yes, in that case, the consciousness in the alchemical chip is a memory aggregate, which seems to be more advantageous than a person's soul. These alchemists in black uniforms were discussing. However, what they cared about was no longer whether the wizard who uploaded the consciousness was still alive, but whether the alchemical chip carrying the consciousness could make the consciousness in it forever loyal to the Magic Congress of the United States. Looking at his colleagues, Kyosu said softly, "In your opinion, this so-called disadvantage is not only not disadvantage, but also advantage?" Everyone nodded in agreement. Kyosu nodded slightly and said, "In that case, let's consider this alchemical chip as a finished product. Then, let's move on to the next experiment." Hearing Kyosu's words, the alchemists in black uniforms all took action. They knew very well what the next experiment would be. That is to let a wizard who has been brainwashed and passed multiple tests such as legilimency, truth serum, and alchemical detector to ensure that he has been wholeheartedly loyal to the Magical Congress of the United States, take the initiative to dedicate himself and upload his consciousness to the alchemical chip. Then, install the alchemical chip into the alchemical armor that has been manufactured long ago to test the final combat power of the mechanical single soldier. As early as 15 years ago, the alchemists in this laboratory had completed the alchemy of the human body except for the brain, that is, the alchemical armor manufactured after replacing all the organs of the human body with machinery. And now, the alchemical chip used to replace the brain has been manufactured. This means that the human alchemy experiment of the Magical Congress of the United States has reached this stage of the ultimate test. Chapter 677 Mechanical Soldier Test Number 001. Not long after, the alchemist called Mr. Henry by Josu walked into the laboratory with a wizard who was blindfolded with a black eye mask. After the metal door with hundreds of verification procedures closed again, Henry took off the wizard's eye mask. "Mr. Ellerbick, it's time to contribute to the Macusa and the future of the magic world," Henry said softly. Hearing this, Ellerbick's face showed a bit of fanaticism. After being brainwashed by the Macusa, he had already regarded loyalty to the Macusa as the most important thing in his life. Ellerbick said eagerly, "Of course, Mr. Henry, what should I do?" Henry smiled and took Ellerbick to a metal chair. On the table next to the metal chair, there was a metal helmet. Hundreds of wire-like alchemical magic circuits extended from the back of the metal helmet, connecting to the metal chair and another alchemical device that looked like a computer in the distance. Henry said softly, "Mr. Ellerbick, you just need to sit on the chair, put on the consciousness transmitter, and then don't resist." Hearing Henry's words, Ellerbick sat on the metal chair without hesitation and followed Henry's command to put the metal helmet on his head. At this time, Josu came over. He looked at Ellerbick who was fixed on the metal chair and asked, "Can we start?" Henry nodded slightly. So Josu returned to the operating table. He inserted the magic wand into a round hole on the operating table and injected magic power into the operating table. The next moment, a light filled with huge magic power bloomed on Ellerbick's helmet. Ellerbick, who was fixed on the metal chair, seemed to be electrocuted, and his whole body was convulsing wildly. Under the helmet, Ellerbick's facial features were distorted in pain, as if he was tortured by the Cruciatus curse. After an unknown amount of time, when the screen on the console in front of Josu showed the number 100%, Ellerbick's body was completely motionless. Josu glanced at Ellerbick, who was motionless on the metal chair, indifferently, waved his hand, and said indifferently, "Check the physical condition of experiment number 001. In Josu's mouth, Ellerbick seemed to have no name of his own, but was like a little white mouse, with only an experimental code. Hearing Josu's words, several alchemists around him all saluted him, then quickly came to Ellerbick and took off the alchemical device on him. An alchemist repeatedly scanned Ellerbick with an alchemical detector several times. He looked at Kyosu and reported, "Experimenter 001's physical data is normal, but according to the feedback from the alchemical test, his soul is like being tortured, broken, and disordered." Kyosu frowned and asked, "Is it possible to repair his soul? Whether it is alchemical means or magical means?" The alchemist shook his head and said, "It's impossible. His soul is only one step away from completely dissipating. In other words, experimenter 001 has completely turned into a walking corpse and has no soul." Kyosu turned back thoughtfully and looked at the screen showing the number 100%. He whispered, "At the cost of the soul of the person who uploaded the consciousness being completely broken? If the soul of the person who uploaded the consciousness needs to be completely broken in the alchemical chip, then the number of mechanical soldiers produced in the future will correspond to the number of sacrifices. In other words, how many people will there be in the mechanical army of the Magical Congress of the United States in the future? Before that, so many people will need to die first, and their consciousness will be used to operate the mechanical soldiers." Josu shook his head. Whether the cost of making a mechanical soldier is high or not is something that those guys in the Magical Congress of the United States need to worry about. As for him, he only needs to do the final experiment and fulfill his duties. Josu said indifferently, "Send this gentleman back and bring the mechanical soldier test number 001. Henry nodded slightly to Josu, then waved his wand, released the zombie floating spell, and carried Elabik, whose soul was completely broken, out of the laboratory. Another alchemist with an old face came to an alchemical device that looked like a ring. He quickly operated on the operating table. Soon, the middle of this ring-like alchemical device collapsed, as if a passage had been opened. Then, a person, or a robot, whose whole body was made of alchemy, slowly rose from the middle of this ring-like alchemical device. Looking at this robot, that is no different from the human body except for its metal structure, Josu asked, "Mr. Andrea Smirnov, is this the final work of the mechanical soldier? In this laboratory, where human alchemy is secretly carried out, it is also divided into several different departments. The alchemists headed by Josu are responsible for the research of alchemy chips and channels for uploading wizard consciousness. The alchemists headed by Henry are responsible for finding American wizards who meet the standards in terms of talent, wisdom, and ability, and brainwashing and testing them to make them meet the standards for becoming human alchemy experimenters. As for the alchemists headed by Andrea Smirnov, they are responsible for iterating the alchemy of the human body except for the brain. Their goal is to make the mechanical body after human alchemy closer to the real human body, including the various internal organs of the human body, flexible limbs, flowing blood, magical talents and magic reserves. If the research of the alchemists led by Andrea Smirnov is successful, then the mechanical soldiers transformed by their human alchemy will be real human bodies that will not age or wither." Hearing Josue's question, Andrea shook her head and said, "This is just the mechanical soldier test number. Our final product has completed the imitation of blood and skin, which can make the appearance of the mechanical soldier look no different from that of a human, and its functions are close to those of a human." Josue nodded slightly, and he signaled several alchemists beside him to push the mechanical soldier test number over. Josue pulled the alchemy chip that stored Elabik's consciousness from the operating table and came to the mechanical soldier test number. He gently tapped the mechanical soldier test number on the forehead with his magic wand. Chapter 678 Sloln's Invitation. Neville's communication skills. The weak magic wave spread out, and a slot popped out from the forehead of the mechanical single soldier test number. Josue installed the alchemical chip into it and pushed the slot back into the forehead of the mechanical single soldier test number. With his magic wand brushing again, the forehead of the mechanical single soldier test number became smooth again. After completing all this, Josue put the magic wand against the heart of the mechanical single soldier test number, and obscure syllables came out of his mouth. After Josue took back his magic wand, the eyes of the mechanical single soldier test number suddenly opened, releasing a strange light. But soon, the mechanical single soldier test number showed a confused look again, and only heard the voice of Elabik coming out of the mouth of the mechanical single soldier test number. "Mr. Josue, I am." Elabik seemed to have lost his memory after sitting on the metal chair, including the painful memory of his soul being tortured. His memory only stayed at the moment when Henry took him into the laboratory. Hearing Elabik's voice, a fanatical and joyful expression appeared on Kyosu's face. "Great. Great. Consciousness loading is successful. Come on, wand." Kyosu turned around enthusiastically and said loudly. Soon an alchemist handed a wand to Kyosu. Unlike the wands used by most wizards, which are made of wood shells and magical animal body tissues as the wand core, this wand is a metal wand. Countless alchemical arrays are embedded together and hidden inside this metal wand, replacing the role of the wand core. Compared with the wands used by other wizards, this metal wand may be more appropriately called a magic conduction amplifier. Kyosu took the metal wand and handed it to Elebik. He said soothingly, "Relax, Mr. Elebik, wave the wand and cast a spell you are best at." In front of this mechanical single soldier test number that carries Elebik's consciousness, Kyosu changed his name and called it Mr. Elebik again. Hearing this, Elebik carefully took the metal wand, waved it gently, and chanted, "Wingardium Leviosa." Invisible magic was released from the interior of the mechanical single soldier test, and then concentrated in the metal wand in his hand, and released from the metal wand. The next moment, the metal seat not far away slowly floated up under the effect of the levitation spell. Great, great. Josu watched this scene with wide eyes, his body and tone were trembling. At the same time, on the Hogwarts Express, which was still moving slowly, after receiving the invitation sent by Sloane, Harry came to the sea carriage. He unexpectedly found that in addition to Neville who was traveling with him, Sloane also invited many people to have lunch. In a seat not far from Sloane, Harry saw Marcus Belby. Marcus' uncle was Damocles, who invented the Wolfsbane potion. Except for Belby, all the people Sloane invited were Harry's old acquaintances. The reason was that except for Marcus Belby, all the young wizards who received Sloane's invitation were members of the DA army. Sitting on Sloane's left was Gryffindor's Cormac McLaggen. Unlike the original book, who joined the reorganized DA army later, McLaggen now became a member of the DA army as early as the first meeting. Don't forget that compared with the original book, the number of members of the DA army has more than doubled, and McLaggen is one of the extra members of the DA army. In addition, Blaise Zabini, who was invited by Sloane in the original book, was unexpectedly not invited. Perhaps it was because Zabini's attitude was more inclined to Voldemort, and the current situation made it almost impossible for anyone to pay attention to Zabini. Sitting on Sloane's right was Ginny Weasley, although Ginny was not seen by Sloane when she cast the Bat Curse as in the original book. However, during the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, Ginny's performance of using the Crushing Curse to kill multiple Death Eaters was reported by the Daily Prophet, which made Sloane appreciate her talent and invited her. In addition to the people who were invited in the original book, many DA army friends also received invitations from Sloane. Among them were Irving and Astoria. Their performance in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries was noticed by people, especially Irving's ancient magic Thunderfall, which killed countless Death Eaters. In addition, Elsa Jones from Hufflepuff College was also invited by Sloane. Elsa's performance in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries was not impressive, but her aunt Gwenga Jones was the captain of the Hellerhead Harpy Quidditch national team, which was the reason why she was invited. After all, Sloane values every talented little wizard, but he also values the connections behind the little wizard. After all the invited little wizards arrived, the small banquet held in the carriage began. Sloane was wearing a velvet suit, and the gold buttons on his vest shone brightly in the sunlight outside the carriage window. Sloane warmly greeted Harry and Neville, who arrived last. "Oh, Harry, my child. It's great to see you. So great. So, you must be Mr. Longbottom?" Facing Sloane's greeting, Neville was not shy. He smiled and nodded at Sloane, and then sat down in the empty seat. Compared with the timid Neville in the original book, Neville, who has experienced countless illusion tests, seems much more mature, both in terms of dealing with people and in his own personality. You know, when the alchemy detector generated an illusion for Neville, the future Gryffindor Swordmaster, Lin intervened and customized the content of the illusion test for Neville. The content of the illusion test is varied. There are combat illusion tests against dark wizards, and naturally there are illusion tests that test infiltration and penetration ability. In this kind of illusion test, Neville needs to completely disguise himself as another person and use that person's style, speech and behavior to contact the NPCs generated by the illusion test without being noticed by the other party. With the experience of disguising himself as someone else and communicating freely, Neville's own communication skills have naturally improved, and even his own character flaws have been compensated to a certain extent. Not only that, in order to train this future Gryffindor swordsman faster, Lin even added some private goods to Neville's illusion test, that is, adding some tasks that can only be completed by using swordsmanship. Chapter 679, Snobby Sloan. After everyone was seated, Sloan gestured to everyone to enjoy the food on the table, and looked at everyone and asked, I heard that you have established a student group called the DA Army. May I know who among you is in it? Except for Marcus. Everyone raised their hands, which made Marcus look a little embarrassed. Seeing this scene, Sloan opened his mouth in surprise. He thought that this student group called the DA Army was only led by two powerful young wizards, Roland Lowell, who were promoted to the level of Demon King, and the members of this student group were not necessarily powerful, but just got the help of Roland Lowell. But from what happened in front of him, the DA Army might not be as simple as he imagined. Sloan looked at Irving. Among the young wizards he invited, only Irving and Astoria gave him a feeling of unfathomable depth. Especially this gentle and elegant Irving. He felt like he had seen Dumbledore when he was young. Sloan asked kindly, Irving, I saw your performance in the Daily Prophet. Can I see your thunder magic? It looks like a variation of the weather spell. Irving nodded casually. When he turned his left hand, a palm-sized lightning was suspended in his palm. From this lightning, everyone present could feel a dangerous aura, as if this lightning burst out and could wipe out everyone in the carriage. However, under Irving's perfect control, the aura of this lightning did not leak out at all. What a powerful, silent and wandless spell. Sloan said in amazement, I dare say that even Dumbledore at your age can't do better than you. Facing Sloan's praise, Irving just smiled slightly and waved his hand to disperse the thunder in his palm. Sloan exclaimed again. Even he had to chant the 10,000 ending spells to barely suppress the lightning that was powerful enough to annihilate everyone in the carriage. But Irving dispersed it so easily. What a powerful control. The power of thunder is a very lethal and violent form of magic. It is like a fierce fire. Even the wizard who releases it will be attacked by it if he does not have enough power. At this time, Sloan looked at Astoria, who was sitting next to Irving. Among all the people present, only Irving and Astoria made Sloan feel unfathomable. If Sloan guessed correctly, it should be the power of ancient magic. If I guess correctly, Astoria, you should also master an ancient magic like Irving? Sloan asked curiously. Facing her future professor of potions, Astoria did not hide anything. She whispered, yes, thanks to this ancient magic, I was able to get rid of the blood curse in my body. Blood curse? Sloan's voice rose a few notches. He said in surprise and regret, this ancient magic can actually solve the extremely vicious blood curse like the blood curse? What a pity. If this ancient magic can be popularized, then there won't be so many patients suffering from the blood curse in the world. Astoria smiled slightly and said, I'm looking for a way to castrate this ancient magic. If I succeed, I will extract a part of this ancient magic that solves the blood curse. By then, the blood curse will no longer be an incurable curse. Hearing Astoria's words, Sloan felt like he had picked up a treasure. Sloan said eagerly, are you serious? If this kind of magic can really be invented, Astoria, I think you can get a medal of the Order of Merlin. Then Sloan looked at Marcus, who was silent. Sloan said, just like the uncle of this young Marcus, I had the honor of teaching his uncle Damocles. He was a very outstanding wizard, very outstanding, and his Order of Merlin is absolutely worthy. Do you see your uncle often, Marcus? After learning that Sloan would become their professor of potions, Astoria and others who secretly knew about this professor were no longer surprised that Sloan suddenly changed the subject of the conversation. On the contrary, Marcus, who was Colt, had just eaten a big mouthful of quail. He was eager to answer Sloan's question, swallowed too fast, and his face suddenly turned into the color of liver, and he choked and couldn't speak. Ancestral. Sloan pointed his wand at Marcus and chanted the spell calmly. Marcus's trachea seemed to be unblocked all of a sudden. No, I don't see him very often. Marcus panted, and his tears were choking. Yes, of course. I dare say he must be very busy. Sloan looked at Marcus with an inquiring look and said, I think he must have put a lot of effort into inventing the wolfsbane potion. I think so, Marcus said. Before he was sure that Sloan had finished interrogating him, he seemed to be afraid to eat quail again. Well, it's like this. He and my father don't have a good relationship, so I don't really know, Marcus said. His voice gradually became much lower. That was because Sloan's face suddenly turned cold when he heard that Marcus' father didn't have a good relationship with Damocles. Sloan has always been a snobbish person. He values connections. After learning that Marcus could not bring him Damocles connections, he knew that Marcus was no longer useful. However, Sloan would not do anything to offend others. He just ignored Marcus instead of saying bad things to him or driving him away. Sloan looked at the other people in the carriage one by one and chatted with them cordially. Finally, Sloan cast his eyes on Elsa, the little witch from Hufflepuff. Your name is Elsa Jones, right? Sloan said cordially, I know your Aunt Gwenja Jones. She is a great batsman. I think you should have inherited her flying talent, right? Elsa whispered, Cedric once invited me to join the Hufflepuff Quidditch team, but I'm not as interested in Quidditch as my aunt, so I declined. Hearing this, Sloan said regretfully, oh, that's a pity. But I think a smart little witch can shine everywhere, right? Chapter 680 Draco's trial cannot be delayed. Elsa smiled lightly and said, you're right, sir. Sloan seemed to have thought of something, and he asked again, Elsa, can I call you that? If I remember correctly, you also participated in the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, right? Do you have outstanding fighting talent? Elsa shook her head honestly and said softly, no, my fighting talent is not outstanding. The reason why they invited me to participate in this operation may be because of my talent and attainments in healing magic. Not far away, Irving smiled and echoed, yes, if you ask me, except for Madame Pomfrey in our school hospital, I have never seen a little witch with such ability in healing magic. Irving's words aroused Sloan's curiosity. He leaned his head forward and asked, tell me in detail. Astoria chuckled and said, among all our companions, Elsa is the only little witch who can cast healing magic on us without interference during the battle. Normally, when wizards cast healing magic to heal patients, they need to do it in a quiet environment without being disturbed. This is why Madame Pomfrey repeatedly forbade young wizards to make noise in the school hospital. That is not only to prevent the young wizards from making noise and affecting the recovery of patients, but also to prevent them from affecting Madame Pomfrey's healing magic. But Elsa can cast healing magic in a complex environment, even in battle, without being affected, which is commendable. In layman's terms, Elsa is the only wizard among the members of the DA army who can output and heal at the same time. Sloan looked at Elsa with more appreciation. He invited this little witch to attend the small banquet in the carriage because he was originally attracted by her relationship with her Aunt Gwenja Jones. But unexpectedly, this little witch brought him such a big surprise. Sloan said admiringly, perhaps you are not as good as your companions in knocking down Death Eaters, but you are the most irreplaceable member of the team. Sloan's straightforward praise made the little witch lower her head shyly. This small party in the carriage was neither short nor long. After the announcement of the Hogwarts Express sounded, announcing that the train was about to arrive, Sloan asked everyone to return to their own carriage to change into wizard robes. So, the DA army filed out and left the carriage. If you ask me, this Professor Sloan is really a weirdo. Ron walked out, still muttering. McLaggen shrugged and said, isn't it? He is also a bit snobbish. You saw that after Marcus said that his father and Damocles did not have a good relationship, he ignored Marcus. Irving smiled and pressed his hands down, signaling the few people not to talk anymore. Irving said softly, regardless of Professor Sloan's character or personality, as long as he has enough knowledge of potions and is willing to teach us wholeheartedly, that's enough, isn't it? Hermione agreed. Yes, Harry said that Professor Sloan was invited by Dumbledore himself. There is no problem with his position. Even if everyone has different opinions on Professor Sloan, for now, we need to treat him as a professor and respect him. Ron and McLaggen shrugged without comment. After the group returned to their respective carriages and changed into wizard robes, the Hogwarts Express arrived. Everyone got off the train and took the Thestrals to Hogwarts Castle. After all the young wizards sat down in the hall, the sorting ceremony went on as usual, and Dumbledore also announced the transfer of professors. That is, Professor Snape became the Professor of Defense Against the Dark Arts, and Professor Slughorn was the new Professor of Potions. After the sumptuous opening dinner, the prefects of each college stood up and led the first-year students of their own colleges to the direction of the common room. After learning that Lin and Irina had no intention of serving as prefects, Dumbledore selected male and female prefects from each college, but surprisingly, except for the prefect of Slytherin, all the prefects of the other 3 colleges were members of the DA army. However, Irving, the male prefect of Slytherin in the 7th year, is also a member of the DA army. Today, the DA army has basically taken over the student management of Hogwarts. The 5th year Slytherin prefect fell ill, so Irving, the 7th year Slytherin prefect, took on the responsibility of guiding the 1st year students to the Slytherin common room. He greeted the freshmen gently and led the way. The old students of other grades returned to their dormitories. After a whole day on the Hogwarts Express, most of these young wizards were physically and mentally exhausted. Their heads were turbid, and the only thought was to quickly return to the warm big bed in the dormitory and have a good sleep. But among these young wizards, there was an exception, that is Draco Malfoy. After the dinner, Draco did not go in the direction of the Slytherin common room, but went to the tower where the Ravenclaw common room was located. Lin only gave Draco 1 month. If he wanted to protect his family and get the protection of Lin and Irina, then Draco must find and destroy Voldemort's Horcrux within this month and complete the trial given to him by Lin. Therefore, it is urgent to investigate the whereabouts of Ravenclaw's crown. Draco walked with a heavy heart. Unconsciously, he had arrived outside the Ravenclaw common room. The door knocker was not far in front of him. Draco looked at the door knocker thoughtfully and stopped. It was not because he was not confident that he could answer the door knocker's question, but because, without sufficient reasons, it would be difficult for him, a Slytherin, to enter the Ravenclaw common room, to investigate safely without being driven away by the little eagles in the Ravenclaw common room. After all, his father was a former Death Eater, which made it impossible for him to get rid of the stigma of the Death Eater's son before he passed Lin's trial and whitewashed himself with Lin. In fact, if the explosion at Malfoy Manor was reported truthfully, then the Malfoy family's record of severely damaging Voldemort and the Death Eater camp would be enough for the Malfoy family to draw a clear line with Voldemort. But the occurrence of this explosion seriously shook the international secrecy law. If Lin had not ordered the truth of the matter to be suppressed, his father, Lucius Malfoy, would probably be held responsible for the explosion that threatened the statute of secrecy and would have paid an even heavier price. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 681. Ms. Grey doesn't like him. What did he do wrong? Exclamation mark. Therefore, whether it was Lin's willingness to give him a chance to test him, all in suppression of the truth and saving his father, Draco was extremely grateful to her. Just when Draco was entangled, a translucent figure passed through the wall and slowly floated out. This was a tall ghost lady. After seeing Draco, she was surprised at first. However, after seeing the Slytherin College badge on Draco's chest, she seemed to think of something unbearable in the past, and her expression suddenly became cold. Little wizard of Slytherin, why are you here? It should be almost curfew time now, right? The ghost lady said in a cold voice. Draco was startled by the sudden voice. He looked at the ghost lady, and after recognizing her identity, he said respectfully, "Good evening, Ms. Grey. I'm Draco Malfoy." Ms. Grey raised her eyebrows. Draco's politeness did not improve his impression of her. After all, the Slytherin student who deceived her at the beginning used his appearance and hypocrisy to deceive her. Ms. Grey said lightly, "You haven't told me why you came here when curfew is almost over?" Draco hesitated for a moment before honestly telling his purpose. "Ms. Grey, I want to find the whereabouts of Ravenclaw's crown. I wonder if I can ask for your help." Hearing Draco's words, Ms. Grey's face suddenly became ugly, and her tone became colder. Slytherin is also worthy of coveting Ravenclaw's treasure? Get out of here, little wizard. Ravenclaw does not welcome you. As she said, Ms. Grey's attitude suddenly became bad and tough, and she forced Draco out of the tower. Ms. Grey's attitude made Draco a little confused. He didn't understand. He was obviously very polite and his tone was as respectful as possible, but why did Ms. Grey dislike him so much? You know, Draco, who grew up in the doting environment of the Malfoys, can be said to be very arrogant and domineering. If it weren't for the many changes that happened to the Malfoy family, which led to a great change in Draco's mentality, I'm afraid Draco would still be arguing with Harry now. But even if his mentality changed, there were very few people that Draco could treat with such respect, and Ms. Grey was one of them. This made it even more difficult for Draco to understand. He returned to the dormitory, and after taking a look at Lin's bed that was isolated by the alchemical barrier, he lay down on the bed with a puzzled face. For a whole night, Draco tossed and turned in bed, but he couldn't figure out why Ms. Grey didn't like him so much. Calm down, Draco, you don't have much time left. In the middle of the night, Draco sat up suddenly from the bed and whispered to himself. Draco began to recall everything that happened after he met Ms. Grey, but his vague memory prevented him from getting a definite answer. Draco said in distress, it would be nice if there was a pensieve. Otherwise, I'll borrow it from Professor Dumbledore tomorrow. I just don't know if he will agree. With a strong sense of uneasiness and confusion, Draco fell asleep in a daze. The next day, after breakfast, the first thing the 6th grade wizards need to do is to finalize their schedule for the school year, and Irina is no exception. Irina poked her head out and looked at Hermione's schedule beside her. After Professor McGonagall confirmed Hermione's OWL results, Hermione's schedule was finalized. She will continue to study charms, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, herbology, divination, potions and ancient runes. The 6th grade schedule looks quite relaxed, Hermione said happily. Irina covered her mouth and smiled lightly, teasing, compared to your 3rd grade schedule, no matter how many elective courses you take, it seems to be very easy, right? Hermione slapped Irina in anger, and then leaned over to look at Irina's schedule. Irina's elective courses were charms, defense against the dark arts, transfiguration, herbology, potions, and care of magical creatures. In fact, except for care of magical creatures, the other 5 courses were all Irina's required courses. Among these courses, Irina was probably best at herbology and care of magical creatures, thanks to her affinity for magical animals and magical plants. The next best were charms and defense against the dark arts, thanks to Irina's magic level. She had mastered the ability to cast spells silently and without a wand, so she would have no problem taking the Newt's exam. Transfiguration and potions are Irina's weaknesses, but Irina does not intend to give them up. After all, although her transfiguration and potions are not as good as those of the best, they are better than those of the worst. Most of the 6th graders have no classes in the 1st and 2nd periods in the morning, and only the 3rd period is a defense against the dark arts class. So, after finishing breakfast and getting his own schedule, Draco went all the way to the headmaster's office. Draco did not know the password of the headmaster's office, and he had never known the cheating method of reading Honeydukes' dessert list, which made him distressed, and did not know how to pass the stone statue in front of him. Fortunately, Dumbledore was in the headmaster's office at this moment, and he also learned from the connection with the stone statue that Draco was wandering outside the headmaster's office. Dumbledore remotely ordered the stone statue to make way and let Draco come to the headmaster's office. Good morning, Draco. Looking at Draco, who was very different from his original arrogant image and became a little shy, Dumbledore greeted him happily. Good morning, Professor Dumbledore. I came to see you for. Draco rubbed his hands together and finally made up his mind to borrow the pensieve from you. Oh. Dumbledore asked with interest, may I know what you want to borrow the pensieve for? Draco hesitated for a moment and honestly told his experience last night. He said, I want to review my memory and find the details I missed. I want to know why Miss Grey is so disgusted with me and what I did wrong. Dumbledore looked at Draco thoughtfully. Ravenclaw's diadem. Dumbledore suddenly realized that it seemed that Draco's appearance in his headmaster's office was probably related to Lin's plan to find Ravenclaw's diadem. Chapter 682, Children's Playing House Trial. After realizing that Draco's arrival might be related to Lin's plan, Dumbledore relaxed. He smiled and pointed to the pensieve not far away, saying, "Go ahead, Draco." After Draco thanked Dumbledore, he came to the pensieve. He put the wand against his temple, copied his memory from last night, and pulled it out. Draco put the silver white thread into the pensieve, and then immersed his entire head in it. As the world spun, Draco appeared in his memory, and now he was in a third-person perspective. In Draco's perspective, he was standing stupidly outside the Ravenclaw common room last night, motionless like a sculpture. After a long while, Ms. Grey slowly floated out of the wall. Seeing this scene, Draco immediately concentrated his mind and looked at Ms. Grey's every move. When Ms. Grey saw herself in her memory, her face was still very calm, and she was a little gentle to her children. So, when did Ms. Grey's attitude change? Draco stared at Ms. Grey's every move, and when he saw that Ms. Grey's attitude changed, after seeing the Slytherin badge on his chest in his memory, Draco frowned. Just because he was a student of Slytherin College, he felt disgusted with him? Exclamation mark. Why is that? Exclamation mark. Draco thought with a frown, but soon he figured it all out. Draco was not stupid, on the contrary, he was very smart. Who was the most likely person to cause disgust in Slytherin College in the past 100 years? Exclamation mark. Wasn't it Voldemort? Wasn't the Ravenclaw crown that Draco was looking for Voldemort's Horcrux? Thinking of this, Draco looked up suddenly. Could it be that Voldemort, who was still a student of Slytherin College, had met Ms. Grey and left a bad impression on her? Exclamation mark. Draco continued to read with such thoughts in mind. Little Slytherin wizard, why are you here? It should be almost curfew now, right? Good evening, Ms. Grey. I'm Draco Malfoy. There was nothing wrong with these two sentences. Under Draco's observation, Ms. Grey's demeanor did not change too obviously because of this conversation. You haven't told me why you came here when curfew is almost approaching. Ms. Grey, I want to find the whereabouts of Ravenclaw's diadem. I wonder if I can ask for your help. In this conversation, Draco finally found something wrong. That is, when Ms. Grey heard him mention the whereabouts of Ravenclaw's diadem, her expression suddenly changed. She looked at herself in her memory, as if she was no longer facing a student, but facing an enemy with a blood feud. Fortunately, Draco had the identity of a student, which made Ms. Grey suppress her anger and just drove him away without doing more. Slytherin is also worthy of coveting Ravenclaw's treasure. Get out of here, little wizard. Ravenclaw does not welcome you. After Ms. Grey's voice sounded and drove away the memory of himself, this memory also ended. Draco, who left the pensieve, was thoughtful. Ms. Grey's attitude changed drastically after he mentioned Ravenclaw's diadem. There must be something strange here. The reason why Ms. Grey's attitude changed drastically was definitely not just because she coveted Ravenclaw's diadem. After all, no matter which college the little wizard mentioned, the Gryffindor sword to the almost headless Nick, the Hufflepuff gold cup to the fat friar, or the Slytherin locket to the bloody baron, he would not be expelled by the other party. But Ms. Grey did this. Draco was sure that it was not just because he mentioned Ravenclaw's diadem, but because, as a student of Slytherin College, he mentioned that he wanted to find the whereabouts of Ravenclaw's diadem. This led to Ms. Grey's disgust. Could it be that Miss Grey knows the whereabouts of Ravenclaw's diadem, or clues? And the reason why she dislikes me so much, maybe it's because Voldemort did something similar to me, or even the same thing. Draco thought so. If this is true, then Draco must find a way to completely separate himself from Voldemort's impression in Ms. Grey's mind. Draco must make Ms. Grey realize that he and Voldemort are definitely not the same kind of people, and his purpose is definitely not to deceive her, let alone use her to possess Ravenclaw's diadem. Draco felt annoyed again. Judging from Ms. Grey's current attitude towards him, she might not be willing to listen to his explanation. It seems he can only take one step at a time. Draco's face was not good, but he still forced a smile, thanked Dumbledore, and then left the headmaster's office. After the door of the headmaster's office was closed again, Dumbledore looked at the door and said thoughtfully, "It seems that Draco has changed a lot, don't you think?" As Dumbledore finished speaking, a figure suddenly appeared out of thin air and appeared on the chair opposite Dumbledore. The owner of this figure was Lin En. Of course, Lin had a smile on his face. After so many changes, even Malfoy Manor was completely destroyed by the simultaneous explosion of 10 alchemical shells. It is commendable that Draco can maintain his nature and not change his temperament because of the collapse. Dumbledore nodded in approval, and he asked again, "Draco is looking for a Venclaw's diadem. This should be your instruction, right? Even his thinking is intentionally guided by you, right?" Lin said softly, "I only gave him some clues at the beginning." He was able to point the clues to Ms. Grey in just one day, and discovered the connection between Ms. Grey and Ravenclaw's diadem. This gave me a lot of surprises. Dumbledore smiled and said, "Lin, you should already know the whereabouts of Ravenclaw's diadem, right?" Lin shrugged and did not comment. "If not, I would not treat such an important matter as the Horcrux as a child's trial, don't you think, Professor Dumbledore?" Listening to Lin En's meaningful words, Dumbledore laughed dumbly. When Harry was in the first grade, he set up the Chamber of Secrets to hide the Philosopher's Stone. Wasn't it a child's playhouse trial specially arranged, after knowing the result? Exclamation mark. Chapter 683 Snape's Defense Against the Dark Arts Class, The Advantages of Silent Casting. By the way, Professor Dumbledore, if I'm not mistaken, you invited Professor Sloan to teach us potions, but it doesn't seem as simple as it seems? Lin asked in a firm tone. Dumbledore nodded slightly, his eyes became more serious, and he said, "Horace was once Voldemort's professor. There may be content about Horcruxes in his memory. Even though we have inferred that Voldemort made 7 Horcruxes, I still hope to verify our conjecture from Horace's memory." Dumbledore said so. Lin whispered, "But his memory was modified by himself, wasn't it? How do you plan to get this memory?" Dumbledore said, "I will give Harry a private lesson to help him understand Voldemort's past and more secrets about Horcruxes. At the end of the course, I will let him know that he is also a Horcrux. During this period, I will let Harry help me get this memory. Let Harry know his identity." This seems a bit cruel. Harry was in his prime youth, but he had to die in order to kill Voldemort. This was a cruel truth that could not be accepted by anyone. But Lin understood that there was no better choice, and Harry should also take on the responsibility of being the savior. Lin stood up and said softly, "I understand, Professor Dumbledore. I will cooperate with your actions in secret." On the other side, Draco hurried and finally arrived outside the classroom before the defense against the dark arts class began. This defense against the dark arts class was shared by the 6th grade Gryffindor and Slytherin, including the little snake of Slytherin College. Everyone felt a little uneasy when approaching the defense against the dark arts classroom. The reason was that Snape finally became the professor of defense against the dark arts this year, and according to Snape's strict requirements, no one knew how much snake venom they would be exposed to in this class. After all, the Snake King who spewed venom from his mouth would not care which college you were from when you made a mistake. At this time, Snape had already walked into the corridor. Becoming the professor of defense against the dark arts did not allow him to tidy up his appearance. His greasy black hair was parted on both sides, framing his sallow face. "Come in." Snape glanced coldly at the little lions and little snakes standing in the corridor, and then turned and walked into the classroom and came to the podium. Long before this defense against the dark arts class began, Snape had already branded his own personality traits in this classroom. The curtains of the classroom were drawn tightly, and there was only the faint light from the candles, which was dimmer than usual, making this classroom like a dungeon, extremely dark. There were some pictures on the walls of the classroom that had never been seen before. These pictures showed people suffering hideous wounds and strangely distorted body parts. All the little wizards sat down in their seats. None of them spoke, and they all turned their heads to look at these gloomy and terrifying pictures on the wall. "I haven't asked you to take out your books yet." Snape closed the door of the classroom. He glanced around the classroom and stopped at a few young wizards who put their textbooks on the table. "I have something to say to you. I hope you can concentrate highly. Hearing Snape's words, the young wizards holding textbooks all turned pale and hid the books in their school bags. When everyone put away their textbooks and looked at Snape, he finally spoke. "So far, you must have changed 5 professors for this course. Needless to say, these professors have their own teaching methods and teaching focuses. In this chaotic situation, I'm surprised that so many of you can barely pass the OWL exam for this course. If you can all keep up with the advanced class, I will be even more surprised, because its content is much more advanced." As Snape spoke, he walked down the podium and walked around the classroom. He spoke in a lower voice, which even sounded a little rhythmic. As soon as he opened his mouth, he had the tone of a 20-year-old professor. Irina sat in her seat, secretly complaining in her heart. Snape finally returned to the podium. His tone was a bit fanatical. "Dark magic is varied, ever-changing, and endless. Fighting them is like fighting a multi-headed monster. As soon as you cut off one head, a new head will pop up immediately, which is more ferocious and cunning than the original one. What you are facing is something unpredictable and indestructible. Therefore, your defense must be as flexible and innovative as the dark magic you need to deal with. These pictures vividly show the situations of those victims. For example, being hit by the Cruciatus curse, feeling the kiss of the Dementors, or being invaded by the corpses." As Snape spoke, he knocked heavily on the 3 pictures on the wall with his wand. The 3 pictures were a witch who was obviously screaming in pain, a pool of blood on the ground, and a wizard curled up in the corner with a dazed look in his eyes. Snape was like a big bat, his black robes swaying silently behind him. After finishing his opening remarks, he suddenly turned his face to the group of young wizards, startling them. "I think you may be unfamiliar with the use of silence spells. Who can tell me what are the benefits of silence spells?" Snape asked in a calm tone. As Snape's voice fell, nearly half of the people in the classroom raised their hands, which surprised Snape. However, when he saw that all the young wizards who raised their hands belonged to Gryffindor College, while the little snakes of Slytherin huddled in their seats like quails, not daring to raise their hands, Snape's face suddenly became ugly. In fact, these little lions who raised their hands were also members of the DA army, and in Lin En's illusion test, almost all members of the DA army were already able to use silent spells proficiently last year. Even the talented little wizards were able to try to cast spells without a wand. Hermione, a top student, even cast a floating spell without a wand, and without a sound. Snape's eyes swept over the little snakes in Slytherin. He hoped that someone would stand up and answer his question, but he was doomed to be disappointed. Even Draco, the most talented of these Slytherin students, could not answer his question. In desperation, Snape had to randomly choose a little lion from Gryffindor College. The little lion said confidently, "Silent casting can prevent the enemy from understanding your intentions in advance from the sound of your spells. In other words, silent casting is more concealed and can win you more advantages. A wizard who is proficient in silent casting can even chant a spell of a coma, but release a disarming spell, which has the effect of confusing the enemy and catching them off guard," the little lion said with a smile. Chapter 684 They can destroy the Auror office. Snape nodded in surprise and asked the little lion to sit down. Snape didn't expect that the little lion he randomly selected could give such a wonderful answer. This answer is different from the textbook, but it is rich in the wizard's own understanding. Basically, only wizards who have mastered the skills of silent casting and are skilled enough can give such an answer. Could it be that this little lion from Gryffindor College has already mastered the skills of silent casting? Exclamation mark. Snape wanted to test the silent casting skills of the little wizard who raised his hand just now, but after seeing the Slytherin snakes on the other side of the classroom with incredible expressions, Snape shook his head helplessly. As a qualified professor of defense against the dark arts, he naturally had to take care of everyone in the classroom, especially those idiots in his own college with heads like trolls. Even those Gryffindor lions can answer the questions. Why can't the Slytherin snakes? Exclamation mark. Snape explained the concept of silent spell casting, and then said calmly, "Now you will be divided into groups of 2. One will try to cast a curse on the other, but you are not allowed to say it out loud. The other will try to repel the curse, but you are also not allowed to say it out loud. Let's start." In less than 5 minutes, everyone in the classroom had completed the grouping of 2. Irina and Hermione were in a group, and they stood 5 meters away from each other. Irina looked at Hermione and whispered, "Go all out, Hermione, let me see what your current magic level is." On the other side, after the Slytherin snakes were divided into groups, they began training. Snape slowly walked to the middle of these snakes and watched them train. Half a class had passed, and none of the Slytherin snakes could use the silent spell. In order to avoid being sprayed with venom by Snape, they chose to whisper the spell, to fake the illusion that they were casting silently. But without exception, Snape immediately identified their stupid and flawed cheating and sprayed them with venom. Only Draco, after half a class, gradually mastered the skill of silent casting and released a silent tarantella dance towards his partner. His partner did not react in time and failed to block or dodge the curse, so he danced in a weird posture. Snape walked over with a cold face and lifted the curse on the other party. When Snape looked at Draco, his expression finally eased. He nodded gently at Draco and said, "Well practiced." Hearing Snape's praise, Draco did not feel happy at all. He looked at the sparring of the Gryffindor lions next door and wanted to cry, but had no tears. He even felt that his professor was insulting him. Noticing Draco's gaze, Snape frowned and looked at the place where the Gryffindor lions were practicing. But the next second, Snape's defense was broken, and the corners of his mouth twitched wildly. He simply couldn't believe what he saw. Except for a few little lions who did not join the DA army, who were hiding in the corner of the classroom and clumsily chanting spells, the battles between all the other little lions could be described as performances. Yes, performances. The place where these DA army members practiced was quiet, without a single sound, but their wands quickly released colorful beams of light. From these beams, Snape distinguished the disarming spell, stunning spell, cutting spell, crushing spell and small explosive spell, etc., especially the latter few spells, each of which was an offensive spell that could kill the opponent. Especially when Snape saw a little witch from the DA army calmly casting a silent crushing spell at her partner's head. Snape almost rushed out to block it. But what was even more unexpected was that the little witch's partner had no change on his face. He tapped his wand lightly on the beam of the shattering spell, and a miniature armored spell with a diameter of no more than 1 foot was released, which easily deflected the shattering spell. If Snape had not seen the faint blue light of the armored spell condensed on the top of the wand, he would have thought that the little wizard used his wand to pick up the opponent's shattering spell. These DA army members skillfully threw all kinds of spells at their partners frantically, and on average more than 3 spells flew out of their wands every second. They even used various dueling techniques, such as the spell hiding technique, that is, the second spell is hidden behind the tail of a spell, and the spell scattering technique, that is, dividing a spell into many spells, and blocking the opponent's movement at the same time. Their duel was like an extremely wonderful performance. Even in the wizard duel competition, it is difficult to see such a dazzling spell duel. Even the auras, even the wizard army, may not be able to perform at the level of these DA army members in battle. In other words, the weakest members of the DA army in this classroom already have combat power comparable to that of the auras, and most of them have combat power comparable to that of the elite auras. This surprised and unbelievable Snape. Snape also recognized that these Gryffindor lions seemed to be members of the DA army formed by Lin and Irina, which made him feel even more unimaginable. What method did Lin and Irina use to improve the overall strength of the DA army to such a level? Exclamation mark. You know, in the magic world where strength is respected, it is not uncommon for a person to gain incomparable strength, but it is very rare for a person to lead the entire team to have incomparable strength. Snape has no doubt that, if the more than 20 members of the DA army in this classroom, except Irina, were allowed to attack the Ministry of Magic and duel with the Aura Office, they would be able to wipe out the Aura Office without any casualties. With the idea of turning a blind eye to the problem, Snape stopped watching the training of the Gryffindor lions, and gave strict instructions to the Slytherin snakes. This made the snakes miserable. Snape took out his anger on them. Even Draco, who had successfully mastered the skill of silent casting in this class, could not escape Snape's venom. When the defense against the dark arts class was over, most of the Gryffindor lions left with smiles. They even felt that Snape had changed his temper and did not come to pick on them. On the contrary, the Slytherin snakes basically left the classroom with sad faces. Chapter 685, Tactical Potion and the Half-Blood Prince's Potion Textbook. In the afternoon, Irina, Harry and others came to the underground classroom of the Advanced Potion class. Unlike the Defense Against the Dark Arts class, there are not many young wizards who get high scores in the potion subject of the OWL exam. There are only more than 20 young wizards from the 4 colleges who meet the standards and can participate in the Advanced Potion class. Among them, there are 4 Slytherin wizards, 9 Ravenclaw wizards, 3 Hufflepuff wizards and 12 Gryffindor wizards. Even so, the number of people participating in the Advanced Potion class has more than doubled compared to the original book. In view of the small number of people participating in the Advanced Potion class, the young wizards of these 4 colleges were merged into one class and took classes together. In Irina's opinion, Professor Snape is somewhat responsible for the low pass rate of the potion class. Even though Professor Snape is serious and responsible, Irina disagrees with his teaching method. Strictness is a good thing, but forcing students to be under pressure and treating stress as a monster is a bit too much. After all the young wizards who were attending the advanced class arrived, the door of the underground classroom opened. Before Sloan showed up, his big belly was already protruding. Everyone walked into the classroom in an orderly manner. Sloan smiled and greeted everyone. His walrus beard trembled on his smiling mouth. He greeted Irina, Harry and others with great enthusiasm. Especially when he greeted Irina, his eyes revealed a bit of enthusiasm, as if he was looking at a treasure, and a bit of awe for the Demon King level wizard. Unlike the lifeless dungeon-like classroom in previous years, the underground classroom at this time was filled with steam and various strange smells. Everyone walked past a row of crucibles, sniffing the smell of the potion in the crucible. Irina, Harry, Ron and Hermione chose a table closest to a golden crucible, which exuded a burst of fragrance. Draco, who was walking behind the team, hesitated for a moment and chose a table not far from the golden crucible to sit down. The smell of the potion spread as the steam spiraled upward, intoxicating Harry immediately. Harry had never smelled such an alluring smell before. It reminded him of honey pie, the smell of a broomstick, and the scent of flowers that he must have smelled at the burrow. Unconsciously, Harry found himself breathing in slowly and deeply. The smell of the potion filled his body like alcohol, and a great sense of satisfaction slowly came over him. If the Harry sitting here was still the same Harry as before, perhaps he would have been addicted to it, and could not extricate himself. But don't forget that the Harry now is the Harry who has been tested by countless illusions. Love potion. Harry subconsciously used the brain block technique to make himself clear again, and he murmured softly. Irina, who was sitting next to Hermione, gently stretched out her finger, hooked a wisp of white smoke, and felt the smell of the steaming mist of love potion. The warmth of a flame, the stimulating but not offensive smell of burning, and a slight sweetness. That sweetness. Irina thought about it. She recalled the 2 close touches, and her pretty face blushed. Everyone sitting around the golden crucible smelled their favorite smell from the faint mist of love potion. Okay, Sloan finally spoke, and his big body seemed to be floating through the hot steam. Students, please take out your scales, medicine bags, and don't forget to take out your advanced potion making textbook. Just as Sloan was about to start his class, Harry raised his hand. According to Professor Snape's original requirements, Harry and Ron's OWL test scores were not enough for them to take the advanced class, so Harry and Ron did not prepare the textbooks for potions in advance. After learning about Harry and Ron's situation, Sloan strode to a storage cabinet in the corner. He fumbled around for a while, took out 2 tattered copies of Advanced Potion Making by Labasho Parlach and 2 sets of dim and faded scales, and handed them to Harry and Ron. Harry and Ron took the old books and old scales in their hands and returned to their seats. Irina leaned over her head. After she saw the old book in Harry's hand and the words "This book belongs to the Half-Blood Prince" written on the back cover, she showed a barely perceptible smile on her face. As early as Lin had thoroughly understood the notes in the book and shared them with her, they erased the sharp spell recorded in the book and put it back to its original place. The reason why Lin and Irina wanted to erase the sharp spell recorded in the book was that they had already taught this spell to the members of the DA army, and erasing it would not arouse Harry's suspicion. The second reason was that this spell was indeed too dangerous. Lin and Irina did not want other little wizards in the future to learn the sharp spell after getting the book and then use it everywhere. After all, those young wizards were not members of the DA army, and they had not been warned by them in advance. Moreover, no one knew how many years it would take for this old book to fall into the hands of others. After taking the old book for Harry and Ron, Sloane returned to the front of the classroom. He pushed his already bulging chest forward again, and the buttons on his vest were about to burst off. Sloane said loudly, "I have prepared several potions to open your eyes. Of course, it's just for interest. When you finish the advanced class, you should be able to make such things. Although you haven't made it yourself, you must have heard of it. Who can tell me what this one is?" As he said, Sloane pointed to the row of crucibles in the front. The potions in these crucibles were Truth Serum, Polyjuice Potion, Love Potion, and Felicity Potion, which is called the Lucky Potion. Hearing Sloane's question, all the young wizards of the DA army raised their hands. Although they didn't know how to brew these potions, they had to deal with them in the missions of the illusion test. Whether it was the Truth Serum used to interrogate the enemy, the Polyjuice Potion used for disguise and infiltration, or the Love Potion used to incite, control, and use the enemy, they were all tactical potions that they used a lot in the illusion test. Yes, the young wizards of the DA army collectively called all potions that could be used in combat or various actions tactical potions. Chapter 686. You must be sweating profusely, behind bars. Harry was the first to stand up. He pointed to a cauldron in the distance. The potion in the cauldron was like rolling clear water. He said confidently, "This is Truth Serum. It is colorless and tasteless. The user cannot tell lies. It is the best choice for interrogating enemies and forcing intelligence." Considering Harry's future employment tendency to become an aura, Lin increased the probability of Harry playing the role of an aura and completing various tasks as an aura when the alchemy detector generated Harry's illusion test. Therefore, among the members of the DA army, Harry was the one who had the most contact with Truth Serum. After getting Harry's answer, Sloane first nodded to confirm his answer and then wiped his forehead with some shame. Sloane said helplessly, "Harry, the Ministry of Magic has very strict regulations on the use of Truth Serum, and it cannot be abused at will. As for interrogating enemies and forcing intelligence, that is a means used only in wartime." Harry shrugged and sat down. After Harry sat down, Neville stood up again. The intensive training before the owl exam and the use of potions and the illusion test allowed Neville to successfully pass the test and attend Sloane's advanced potion class. Neville mustered up his courage and pointed to another crucible. He saw the most familiar mud-like thing inside that was slowly bubbling. Neville said, "This is Polyjuice Potion, sir. Adding human hair to the Polyjuice Potion will allow the user to completely change into that person's appearance within a certain period of time. This time depends on the level of the potion master who brewed the Polyjuice Potion. Polyjuice Potion has many uses. Whether it is to obtain intelligence, steal secret keys, or disguise and infiltrate enemy camps, it is an excellent choice. Sometimes, Polyjuice Potion is better than the disillusionment charm." Neville said so. In the illusion test specially customized by Lin for Neville, basically 1 out of every 3 illusion tests can use the magic potion of Polyjuice Potion. Listening to Neville's introduction to the use of Polyjuice Potion, Sloane felt sweating. "You are right, Mr. Longbottom," Sloane said, wiping his sweat, "but in peacetime, all the uses you mentioned are illegal, Mr. Longbottom." Hearing this, Neville shrugged exactly like Harry did, and then sat down. Sloane looked at the remaining pot of love potion that no one had answered, hesitating whether to continue asking questions. However, Hermione stood up directly. Hermione said crisply, "This potion with the luster of mother of pearl and the spiral-shaped steam is a love potion. Love potions have many uses. It can make the person who uses it fall madly and hopelessly in love with you, but in another aspect, it also has a better use." Sloane suddenly had an ominous premonition in his heart, which made him subconsciously raise his hand to stop Hermione from continuing. However, Sloane raised his hand too slowly, and Hermione had already said all the rest of the words. Love potions can make your enemy fall in love with you and be completely fascinated by you, and you can easily make that enemy hand over all the information he has and make that enemy do anything for you, turn against his colleagues for you, kill your other enemies for you, or even die for you. In a sense, love potions can also be a kind of imperious curse that has no side effects on the wizard himself and will not erode the wizard's mind. It allows you to almost completely control the enemy without hurting yourself, of course, unless you think that the enemy falling in love with you is also a kind of harm. Hermione said softly, and she sat down, sweating all over. Prison. Sloane was sweating all over. The cute little wizards in front of him seemed to have become demons with bared fangs and claws in his eyes. Merlin, these little demons, can't they all be the future Tom Riddle? Exclamation mark. Sloane, who was deeply shadowed by Voldemort, wanted to run back to his hometown immediately and retire on the spot after hearing the answers of the three people. Last time he taught a Dark Lord, could it be that this time he would teach a whole class of Dark Lords? Exclamation mark. Thinking of this, Sloane shuddered. He forced a smile that was uglier than crying and said, "Too cruel. Life is getting more and more unpredictable. You shouldn't be in Gryffindor, you should be in Azkaban." Sloane roared in his heart, even though Azkaban no longer existed. In order to change the subject, Sloane was quick-witted. He pointed to the small black cauldron on the podium. Instead of asking questions, he quickly introduced it. "Students, please look, this is a most peculiar little potion, called Felix Felicis. It is also called the Lucky Potion, which can bring you good luck." Hearing Sloane's words, everyone finally stopped thinking about the answers of Harry, Neville and Hermione, and instead leaned over to look at the potion in the small black crucible. The potion in the small black crucible was splashing happily. Its color was like molten gold. The big drops of liquid were jumping on the surface of the crucible like goldfish, but not a drop spilled outside. After seeing the potion in the crucible, Harry, Ron and Hermione all subconsciously turned their eyes to their partner, Irina. More precisely, they turned their eyes to the crystal pendant on Irina's chest. Isn't the liquid sealed in the crystal pendant the same kind of felicity potion in the small black crucible? Exclamation mark. If they remember correctly, Irina has been wearing this crystal pendant for several years, right? Exclamation mark. They always thought it was passed down from Irina's family. Noticing the gazes of Harry and the other two, Irina smiled slightly and said, "That's a gift from Lin to me. Perhaps it's also a blessing for us to always have good luck." At the podium, Sloane continued to introduce the Felix potion by himself. The Felix potion is very complicated to brew. Once you make a mistake, the consequences will be disastrous. However, if it is brewed properly, just like the one in this crucible, you will find that no matter what you do, you will succeed, at least before the effect of the drug disappears. But if you take an overdose of Felix, it will cause dizziness, recklessness and dangerous arrogance. You know, too much of a good thing can be harmful. Too large a dose can be very toxic. However, if you take a little bit occasionally with caution and moderation," Sloane said in a reminiscent tone. Chapter 687 The teaching aid is a bucket of maggots? Exclamation mark. Michael Corner raised his hand and asked with interest, "Have you ever taken it, sir?" "I've taken it twice in my life," Sloane said with a smile. "Once when I was 24 and once when I was 57. I took 2 spoonfuls at breakfast, and those 2 days were perfect." He stared into the distance in a trance. Everyone under the podium thought that whether Sloane was acting or not, the effect of the Felix Felicis must be very tempting. Soon, Sloane seemed to return to reality. He chuckled and said, "However, I will use this small bottle of Felix Felicis as the prize for this class." As Sloane's voice fell, the classroom suddenly became silent, and every bubbling and boiling sound of the surrounding potion seemed to be amplified dozens of times. After Sloane took out the Felix Felicis as the prize for this class, he asked everyone to brew a potion of living hell according to the recipe of advanced potion making in the remaining hour of this class. The little wizard who brewed the best potion of living hell would be able to get the small bottle of Felix Felicis. Irina glanced at Harry beside her. Even though she had mastered all the techniques in the Half-Blood Prince's potion textbook, she deliberately let him down and chose to brew the living hell potion according to the standard method of advanced potion making. From Lin, Irina learned that Harry still had to follow the original process, study with Dumbledore, and learn everything about Voldemort in depth, while getting that memory from Slughorn. With this Felix Felicis, Harry would probably be able to get that memory more safely. Irina thought so. Soon, this potion class ended, and everyone's brewed living hell potion was presented to Slughorn, the undisputed winner. Excellent, too excellent, Harry. My god, you obviously inherited your mother's talent. Lily was so clever in potions class. Here, take it. I'm going to keep my word. I'll give you a bottle of Felix Felicis. You said well. Slughorn said with great surprise, after seeing the living hell potion that Harry brewed. After seeing the small bottle of Felix Felicis fall into Harry's pocket, Irina nodded secretly. It seems that she doesn't need to worry about Dumbledore and Harry's plan. Days passed, and everything in Hogwarts Castle was going on normally. According to the agreement with Dumbledore, Harry came to the principal's office every week, and followed Dumbledore to class. From Dumbledore, Harry gradually learned about the Horcruxes that Voldemort already had, including Slytherin's locket, Hufflepuff's gold cup, Ravenclaw's diadem, Marvell Logorn's ring, diary, and the snake Nagini. It can be said that Harry knows all of Voldemort's Horcruxes except his own. At the same time, Dumbledore told Harry that their belief that Voldemort only had 7 Horcruxes was just their inference. To prove this, they needed Slughorn's memory. Obtaining Slughorn's hidden memory was the homework Dumbledore assigned to Harry. However, Slughorn was so wary that, even though Harry didn't ask directly as he did in the movie, he still couldn't open Slughorn's heart after more than 10 contacts. Not only that, Harry's impression in Slughorn's heart changed from that clear-eyed and stupid little wizard to a cunning old fox like Dumbledore. This made it more difficult for Harry to obtain that memory than in the original book. During this period, the Quidditch teams of the 4 major colleges also ushered in a new round of selection, and the Gryffindor Quidditch team was no exception. Following the 2 captains who graduated, Harry became the new captain of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. After going through countless difficulties and asking Lin to customize some illusion tests for Ron to train Quidditch skills, Harry helped Ron successfully become the goalkeeper of the Gryffindor Quidditch team. However, unlike the original book, Hermione secretly cheated to help Ron enter the team, and Ron only mastered the required level after several games. Ron, who had been trained by the illusion test, successfully defeated all the opponents competing on the same stage with undisputed skills in the selection. But McLaggen was still a little indignant after learning this. After the selection of the Quidditch team, Harry, Ron and Hermione planned to meet Hagrid and share the good news that Ron was also selected for the Gryffindor Quidditch team with Hagrid. However, Harry, Ron and Hermione did not take Hagrid's advanced class for the care of magical creatures course this school year, which made them feel a little guilty and dared not to meet Hagrid. Irina, please. Please. Hermione clasped her hands together and looked at Irina in front of her pitifully. Irina wiped the non-existent sweat from her forehead helplessly and said, "Oh, if you feel sorry for Hagrid, just apologize to him in person." Hermione blinked her big eyes and said, "You are the only one among us who has taken Hagrid's class. With you, Hagrid may be more willing to accept our apology." Unable to persuade Hermione, Irina had to agree to visit Hagrid with the 3 of them. Although she met Hagrid more than once a week in the advanced class of the Care of Magical Creatures class. In fact, Hagrid did not mean to blame Harry and the others. Harry and the others did not take his course, which only made Hagrid feel a little disappointed, but not to the extent of anger. After losing his temper and venting his dissatisfaction, Hagrid invited the 3 people into the house. Harry, Ron and Hermione entered the house happily. They looked very happy until they saw a big bucket in the corner. Then their expressions suddenly became horrified. The big bucket kept making strange noises. The bucket was filled with maggot-like things about a foot long. They were sticky and white and kept wriggling in the bucket. Harry looked at Irina in disbelief. Obviously, Harry mistook this bucket of maggot-like creatures for the blasting-tailed Scroots that Hagrid had recently created by mating with other magical animals. In Harry's opinion, this bucket of maggots might be the teaching aids for Irina's magical creature protection class these days. Hiss. Thinking of this, Harry looked at Irina with sympathy. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. we cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 688. Yaxley sneaks into the Forbidden Forest. Feeling Harry's strange gaze, Irina knew that Harry must have misunderstood. Irina said helplessly, "Obviously, Harry, this is a giant grub, not a hybrid creature as you think in your head full of splendens." When explaining to Harry, Irina playfully adopted the tone of Professor Snape. Sure enough, after hearing Irina's words, everyone, including Hagrid, looked at her in surprise. Ron even shouted, "Bloody hell. Damn Snape, get out of Irina's body." Seeing this, Irina couldn't help laughing. After a while of playing, Hermione looked at the giant grubs in the bucket. She looked at Hagrid. What will they become when they grow up? Hagrid's expression suddenly became sad. He cried for no reason. He sobbed and said, "Nothing will happen. I raised them to feed Aragog. It's Aragog who is dying. It's been sick for a summer and hasn't gotten better. I don't know what I should do if it. We've been together for so long." Hagrid spoke intermittently. He sniffed hard, and the sound made Hermione's eardrums hurt. Harry and Hermione came over, and they patted Hagrid's shoulders from left to right. Even though Harry almost lost his life to that damn spider, he could still empathize with Hagrid. I guess Hagrid's relationship with Aragog is just like his relationship with Hedwig. Harry thought so. Ron stood there with a complicated and tangled look on his face. His fear of spiders was engraved deep in his soul. Moreover, the damned old 8-eyed giant spider almost killed him. Irina watched all this thoughtfully. 8-eyed giant spider. Aragog. So, what would Aragog do at this moment? At the same time, deep in the Forbidden Forest, a figure wearing a black robe and a silver mask, surrounded by countless 8-eyed giant spiders, slowly walked towards the location of Aragog's nest. Strands of turbid magic power surrounded this figure, wrapping the owner of this figure invisibly. This turbid magic power seemed to be able to block all detection magic. Invisible magic power fluctuations spread out from Hogwarts Castle at a high frequency, sweeping across the entire Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry over and over again, making all creatures that appeared within the boundaries of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry invisible. This is the ancient magic of Hogwarts Castle itself, which can protect the castle from invasion by foreign enemies. Even the magic of the Marauder's map, that can show the coordinates of all wizards in Hogwarts Castle, is the result of its creator stealing a ray of power from Hogwarts Castle and connecting it with the Marauder's map. However, even such an ancient magic scan that can detect animagus and the invisibility cloak, one of the 3 Deathly Hallows, cannot penetrate this layer of turbid magic protection. Under the scan of the ancient magic of Hogwarts Castle, the location of this black-robed wizard is like a lawn splashed with turbid black lake water, not smooth, but no abnormality can be seen. This is the secret method of the Yaxley family, which can allow wizards with the blood of the Yaxley family to avoid the detection of the ancient magic of Hogwarts Castle. Yaxley's mouth curled up slightly, and he slowly walked into Aragog's lair. After entering the territory of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry from the other side of the Forbidden Forest, Yaxley encountered some acromanthus spiders not long after sneaking into the Forbidden Forest. After using legilimency to obtain the location of Aragog's nest and the memories of these acromanthus spiders, and using the Imperious Curse to control the acromanthus spiders around him, Yaxley walked towards Aragog's nest. Yaxley was not worried about whether his existence had been discovered by the several demon-level wizards sitting in Hogwarts Castle. After all, with the attitude of Lin and Irina towards the Death Eaters, if he was discovered, he would probably have been blasted into ashes by the demon-level wizards who fell from the sky half an hour ago. Aragog, that's your name, right? The king of this acromanthus spider tribe? Yaxley said softly in a rhythmic tone. Yaxley's voice echoed in this empty nest, but no one responded to him. Seeing this, Yaxley showed a cold smile. He gently shook the wand in his hand, and a ball of red and black flame suddenly ignited. Yaxley said softly, "Don't you want to see me? But I think you should be more reluctant to see the tribe you have raised for decades burned to ashes on this day." The fiend fire released an all-consuming breath, which made Aragog, who was hiding in the dark, tremble even in his soul. He did not doubt whether this fist-sized flame could burn all the 8-eyed giant spiders in the Forbidden Forest. In fact, Yaxley was just scaring Aragog. He did not dare to really let the fiend fire expand wantonly. After all, the secret method of the Yaxley family could only hide his breath, but could not hide the magic fluctuations of the fiend fire. If the fiend fire expanded in the Forbidden Forest and attracted the attention of Hogwarts Castle, then Yaxley would really be dead. Yaxley was just scaring Aragog, but Aragog did not know. Aragog only knew that this human wizard who controlled his descendants and broke into his nest was not a good thing and was not on the same side as Hagrid, but he did not know the identity of Yaxley's Death Eater, let alone the opposition between the Death Eaters and Hogwarts Castle. In Aragog's view, only Hagrid was willing to allow him to live in the Forbidden Forest in Hogwarts Castle. If a wizard wanted to kill all the alien race of Acromanthus, Hogwarts Castle would most likely sit idly by. It was this information gap that made Aragog succumb to Yaxley's threat. "What do you want to do, human wizard?" A low voice came from the depths of the nest, and Aragog's aging, almost immobile body also appeared in front of Yaxley. After realizing Aragog's state, Yaxley's eyes flashed with a barely perceptible joy. The aging and sickly king of the Acromanthus was obviously easier to control than the young and strong king of the Acromanthus. What's more, after Aragog's death, it would not be difficult for Yaxley to support a new king of the Acromanthus who was willing to be loyal to Voldemort among the Acromanthus that had already established connections with the Death Eaters. Chapter 689. Aragog is controlled, and the DA army grows. "Let me introduce myself," Yaxley said softly. "I, Yaxley, am a glorious Death Eater under the command of the Great Dark Lord." Aragog looked at him silently, waiting for his next words. Yaxley said lightly, "Aragog, the king of the Acromanthus of the Forbidden Forest, I hope you can lead and represent the Acromanthus tribe of the Forbidden Forest. Form an alliance with us Death Eaters, and fight for the great cause of the Dark Lord." Hearing this, Aragog said sarcastically, "Fight for the Dark Lord you mentioned? Haha, human wizards, the fights between you wizards have nothing to do with us, so why should we Acromanthus serve you? It's called an alliance, but it's actually a conquest. Do you really think that I'm too old and can't see the intentions of you despicable wizards? You want to use us Acromanthus and use us Acromanthus as cannon fodder for the fights between human wizards? Don't even think about it," Aragog almost shouted. As Aragog finished speaking, densely packed Acromanthus spiders emerged from all directions of the nest, staring at Yaxley who was standing not far from Aragog. If this damned human wizard wanted to use the Acromanthus spiders to work for them and use them as cannon fodder, then it would rather fight to the death with this damned human wizard than let the other party succeed. Thinking of this, a hint of ruthlessness appeared in Aragog's eyes. But at this moment, Yaxley's light words came again. "And in exchange, Aragog, the Death Eaters will help you. The Acromanthus and the Forbidden Forest occupy the entire Forbidden Forest after they break through Hogwarts Castle and let the Acromanthus become the king of the Forbidden Forest. You will be able to reproduce and expand in the Forbidden Forest without limit, feed on all other creatures in the Forbidden Forest, and even expand outward to prey on those stupid muggles. You will have more food, a larger territory, and more long-term development space." Yaxley's extremely bewitching voice floated into Aragog's ears, making Aragog stay where he was. Aragog couldn't help but imagine the future described by Yaxley. The Acromanthus helped the Death Eaters break through Hogwarts Castle and let those stupid wizards who had been preventing their tribe from expanding go away, while the Death Eaters helped the Acromanthus occupy the entire Forbidden Forest. The Acromanthus will kill all those damned and cunning centaurs and lay Acromanthus eggs all over the Forbidden Forest. The Acromanthus will be able to expand to more distant places that it has never seen and prey on humans without magic. But, Hagrid. Aragog thought of Hagrid, who took him out of Hogwarts Castle and sent him to the Forbidden Forest. He trusted him so much. But the future promised by Yaxley was hard for him to refuse. Even though it was highly likely that he would not see that day, his tribe, the Acromanthus tribe in the Forbidden Forest, could. Aragog was struggling in his heart, which made him forget to guard against Yaxley in front of him. Soul out of the body. While Aragog's mind was shaken by the future he promised, Yaxley pointed his wand at Aragog without hesitation. The Imperious curse fell lightly on Aragog and immediately completely controlled the old Acromanthus. A beast is a beast. Yaxley put away his wand and sneered. The Acromanthus spiders around didn't know what happened. They only saw Yaxley pointing his wand at Aragog, but nothing happened, which made them not act rashly. These unintelligent Acromanthus spiders didn't know that their king, Aragog, had been completely controlled by Yaxley using the Imperious curse. They were still waiting for Aragog's orders. Under Yaxley's control, Aragog ordered all Acromanthus spiders in the Forbidden Forest to obey the orders of the Death Eaters. As long as they saw a human wizard with a dark mark on his arm, they would obey the other party's command unconditionally. However, before the Death Eaters attacked Hogwarts in a large-scale manner, Aragog and all the Acromanthus spiders needed to lie dormant in the Forbidden Forest and accumulate their own strength. These Acromanthus spiders will expand their territory in secret. They will not openly attack other creatures in the Forbidden Forest, but lie dormant in the dark and temporarily live in the same territory with the food in their eyes. More eight-eyed giant spiders began to mate. With the reproduction speed of the eight-eyed giant spiders, when Voldemort led the Death Eaters to attack Hogwarts, their number would at least double. It is conceivable that on the day of the final battle, hundreds of thousands of eight-eyed giant spiders will rush out of the Forbidden Forest, rushing towards Hogwarts Castle like a tide of beasts, clearing the way for the Death Eaters. Snowflakes danced outside the window again, beating against the frozen window frames, and Christmas was approaching in a blink of an eye. Hagrid had already moved the 12 Christmas trees that were indispensable in the hall every year, and the stair railings were wrapped with holly and tinsel, and the helmets of the armor flickered with ever-burning candles. Bunches of mistletoe were hung every few sections in the corridor. At this time, the little wizards of the DA army once again came to the room of requirement. In the first week of the school year, Lin and Irina started the DA army's gathering. They had a hunch that Voldemort and the Death Eaters would attack Hogwarts Castle and launch a decisive battle much earlier than in the original book. You know, the situation in the British wizarding world is becoming increasingly unfavorable to Voldemort and the Death Eaters. If Voldemort drags it out any longer, the British wizarding world will probably take the initiative to attack and completely destroy them before Voldemort launches a decisive battle. Voldemort and the Death Eaters have long since fallen from the Dark Lord who was enough to overthrow the regime to terrorists, who can only launch terrorist attacks everywhere. Voldemort can't wait, and those Death Eaters who have long become street rats can't wait even more. Therefore, Voldemort will definitely choose to launch a decisive battle immediately after the lost Death Eaters are replenished, and the Death Eaters camp that was severely injured in Malfoy Manor that day is restored. That will be Voldemort's last chance. Facing the decisive battle that could come at any time, Lin and Irina held DA army meetings more frequently from once a week to twice a week, and even 3 times a week. Umbridge died, and the Ministry of Magic was in the hands of Old Barty, who was supported by Lin and Irina. Even Dumbledore, the headmaster of Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, acquiesced to or even supported the DA army. This made the development and growth of the DA army unhindered. Chapter 690. Draco joins the DA army for 3 rounds of assessment and gains the trust of Ms. Grey. Unlike the 50 or 60 people sitting on the mats at the beginning of the DA army, there are now more than 200 young wizards standing in front of Lin En and Irina. Yes, not long after the beginning of the school year, at the suggestion of Lin En and Irina, the DA army expanded its enrollment. Unlike when Umbridge was still in Hogwarts Castle, the members of the DA army were recruited one by Hermione and her friends in private. The DA army is now completely different. They even posted the recruitment notice on the bulletin boards of the 4 colleges. In this process, it is not that there were no Slytherin students who supported extreme purebloodism to complain, but with the acquiescence of all professors including Dumbledore, their complaints were obviously useless. Of course, even if the DA army expands its enrollment and is open to the entire Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, not everyone can join. Every young wizard needs to go through 3 rounds of assessment when applying to join the DA army. The first round of assessment of the DA army was very simple, that is, to let the little wizards who submitted the application take the initiative to accept the scan of the alchemical detector. The alchemical detector can not only scan the physical condition of the test object, but also has a function similar to legilimency. under the detection of the alchemical detector. The purpose of these little wizards to join the DA army will be revealed, and any little wizards with impure purposes will not be able to pass this round of assessment. Although this round of assessment is not difficult, as long as the little wizards who sincerely want to join the DA army can pass it smoothly. But this round of assessment actually screened out 7 Slytherin little wizards. Among these 7 Slytherin little wizards, 6 were instructed by their families to investigate the DA army after joining the DA army. The remaining Slytherin, under the detection of the alchemical detector, exposed the fact that he was connected with the Death Eaters, which made this Slytherin taken away by the auras sent by the Ministry of Magic that day. The second round of assessment for the DA army is not difficult. It requires a member of the DA army to be willing to guarantee them, that is, to be their guarantor, and recommend them to join the DA army, so that they can pass the second round of assessment smoothly. If these little wizards can pass the third round of assessment and truly join the DA army, then the guarantor who recommends them will become their training contact. As for the responsibilities of the training contact, it is to teach all the spells taught at the gathering last year, including the Patronus Charm and the Divine Sharpness Charm, to the new members who missed the whole gathering last year. In fact, except for the little snake of Slytherin College who wants to join the DA army, the only way is to get the recommendation of Lin, Irving and Astoria, the only 3 people. It is not difficult for the little wizards of other colleges to find a guarantor. After all, there are nearly 20 people in the DA army in each of the 3 colleges of Gryffindor, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff on average, and they always have a friend who is a member of the DA army. As for the third round of assessment of the DA army, which is also the most difficult one, all the young wizards who have passed the first 2 rounds of assessments will gather in the Quidditch field that Lin En borrowed from Dumbledore. They will enter the illusion array made by Lin En one by one, and accept the relatively simple illusion test. Those who pass the illusion test will be able to join the DA army and become a member of the DA army. The purpose of this round of assessment is very simple, that is, to see if you are worthy of being cultivated. After all, if you are already in the 5th grade, but you can't even release a complete disarming spell, then even if you join the DA army, what kind of improvement can you get? Exclamation mark. It is true that the DA army is a student organization to help young wizards improve themselves, but the premise is that you have to be worthy of being cultivated. In this way, after the end of these 3 rounds of assessments, the original 50 or 60 people in the DA army have expanded to more than 200 people now. And the 50 or 60 old members, on average, each of them has 3 or 4 new people in their hands. Now, the DA members in front of Lin and Irina were standing in clusters, with each old member and 3 or 4 new members standing side by side. Among these new members, there were also some familiar faces, such as Draco Malfoy standing behind Irwin. As for why Draco became a member of the DA, it had to start from half a month after the start of school. During this half month, Draco finally thought of a way to gain Ms. Grey's trust. That was to use the kindness of the little eagle who helped other Ravenclaws in front of Ms. Grey to slowly dispel Ms. Grey's vigilance, and then find an opportunity to talk to Ms. Grey by chance. As soon as Ms. Grey was willing to talk to Draco, Draco spoke at a very fast speed before Ms. Grey interrupted him, telling Ms. Grey that the Ravenclaw diadem had been made into a Horcrux by Voldemort, and his idea of finding the Horcrux, destroying it, and breaking Voldemort's conspiracy. After learning that her mother's relics were made into Horcruxes by Voldemort, Ms. Grey, or Helena Ravenclaw, could not stop Draco. Anger and regret immediately appeared on her face. Taking this opportunity, Draco asked for Ms. Grey's help again, and this time, Ms. Grey did not refuse. She knew that Draco was working for Lin, and destroying Voldemort's Horcruxes was, in a sense, revenge for her, even if the price was that her mother's relics were completely destroyed. Ms. Grey finally told Draco her identity, that is, the identity of Helena, the daughter of Ravenclaw. I stole the crown from my mother. I wanted to be smarter and more famous than my mother. So I ran away with the crown. Then my mother fell ill, very ill. Although I had done something unfilial and unjust, she was still eager to see me again. She sent a man to find me. That man had loved me for a long time, but I rejected him. My mother knew that the man would not give up until he found me. He found the forest where I was hiding. I refused to go back with him, so he became furious. The Baron has always been a hot-tempered man. He hated me for rejecting him and was jealous of my freedom, so he stabbed me to death. Draco listened quietly to Helena Ravenclaw's story until he heard the word Baron. He could hardly hide the surprise on his face, and he asked tentatively, "Ms. Ravenclaw, the Baron you are talking about, do you mean the Bloody Baron?" Chapter 691 Draco passed the test. Lin issued pocket anchors. "The Bloody Baron, yes," Helena said calmly. She lifted her cloak, revealing a black wound on her snow-white chest. After he came to his senses, he was filled with remorse, picked up the weapon he had used to take my life, and committed suicide. So many centuries have passed, and he is still in shackles to repent for his sins. He deserves it. Draco didn't care about the grudges between Helena and the Bloody Baron. He continued to ask, "Then, what about the crown? The crown of Ravenclaw?" Helena thoughtfully said, "At that time, I heard the Baron stumbling towards me in the forest, so I hid it, and it has remained there ever since. I hid it in a hollow tree." Hollow tree? Draco's heart sank. Obviously, the hollow tree that Helena mentioned was just the place where Voldemort hid the Ravenclaw crown before he got it and made it into a Horcrux. Now, the Ravenclaw's diadem, which has been made into a Horcrux, should be hidden in Hogwarts Castle, as Lin En gave him, in a place that people can't reach on weekdays. However, before gaining Helena Ravenclaw's trust, Draco also searched all the places he could reach in Hogwarts Castle. He even used the disillusionment charm and Polyjuice potion to search the Gryffindor common room, Hufflepuff common room and Ravenclaw common room, even though Voldemort would not hide the Horcrux there. It can be said that except for the girls' dormitory, Draco searched almost every corner of Hogwarts Castle, but he couldn't find any clues related to the Horcrux. Draco believed in the information given by Lin En, and after this search, he also understood that what Lin En said about the place that people couldn't reach on weekdays was true. At least he tried his best, but couldn't find the place that Lin En said. It seems Helena understood everything from Draco's expression. She said softly, "My mother's relics are no longer in that hollow tree." Draco nodded and told him the information that Lin had told him. According to the existing information, the Ravenclaw's diadem is hidden in Hogwarts Castle, hidden in a place that people cannot reach on weekdays. Only when people have a strong desire, that place will appear in front of people. Hearing Draco's words, Helena's expression became strange. Helena hesitated for a moment before saying, "Maybe I shouldn't tell you this, but in order to destroy the Horcrux and prevent that damn bastard from desecrating my mother's relics. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, the place you mentioned is called the Room of Requirement." Then, Helena told Draco how to enter the Room of Requirement. After getting the information about where the Ravenclaw's diadem was hidden, Draco happily went to the 8th floor. But at this time, the problem came again. The Room of Requirement has countless different forms. How can Draco judge which room the Ravenclaw's diadem is hidden in? Exclamation mark. However, since it is a room used to hide things, the corresponding form of the Room of Requirement must be the form of a room used to hide things. Draco only tried less than 10 times before he entered the correct room. As soon as he entered the room, he used the old chemical detector that Lin lent him to detect a faint evil breath belonging to the Horcrux. So, in the remaining half a month, Draco devoted all his spare time to the Room of Requirement to find the Ravenclaw's diadem. Finally, in the last 5 days of the deadline given by Lin, Draco found the Ravenclaw's diadem on a statue, brought it to Lin, and destroyed it with fiend fire on the spot. This allowed Draco to successfully pass Lin's test, allowing the Malfoy family to be protected by the royal family, and Draco was also recommended by Lin and successfully joined the DA army during the expansion of the DA army. However, Lin didn't have the time to teach Draco one-on-one, which was why Iwin was Draco's training contact. At this time, after the DA members arrived, Lin signaled everyone to start practicing. In the 6 months of gatherings, these new members basically learned all the spells they should learn, except for the sharp spell. The sharp spell was the most dangerous of all the spells taught by the DA army, so this spell was delayed until today, and was only taken out by the training contacts to teach the new members they brought with them. After this gathering, more than half of the new members were able to cast the sharp spell skillfully, and the remaining new members could also do it sometimes, but sometimes not, and they just needed enough training. Irving Farley, Astoria Greengrass, Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger, Andy River, Elsa Jones, Luna Lovegood, Draco Malfoy, Cedric Diggory, Ginny Weasley. The 11 of you stay, the others can leave first. Lin glanced at the members of the DA army and said so. The little wizards who were not called left one after another, leaving only the 11 people who were called by Lin. After they found a cushion to sit down, they looked at Lin with puzzled eyes. Lin did not keep them in suspense. He took out his white chess piece representing the king and told everyone the function of the pocket anchor point. Draco seemed to understand what Lin meant, and he looked at him expectantly. Do you mean that you want us to become the holders of the pocket anchor point and undertake the task of point-to-point support? Lin nodded slightly, and he shouted, Irving Farley. Irving walked over, stood in front of Lin, and gave Lin a standard noble salute. Lin touched his waist with his left hand, and a white chess piece representing knight appeared in his hand. He patted Irving's shoulder in recognition and said softly, Irving, you are the first friend I met after entering Slytherin College. This knight belongs to you. Irving took the white chess piece representing knight with both hands and placed it on his heart. It's Milner, Lin. After Irving went back, Lin looked at Harry, Ron and Hermione who were standing next to each other. Lin shouted, Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger. Hearing Lin's words, Harry, Ron and Hermione walked up in surprise. They were curious, while Lin called them up together. Chapter 692, All the Holders Alive, Rookwood and Werewolves and Vampires. Lin and Irina held hands. Lin looked at the three of them calmly and said, You are Irina's earliest friends in Hogwarts Castle, and you are also her companions who have grown up together. I think it may not be appropriate or fair to give this knight to any of you, so I plan to give it to you. The three of you will keep this pocket anchor together, and you deserve it. Lin said so. Harry walked up happily and took the white chess piece representing knight from Lin. Behind Harry's left, Hermione had a smile on her face, and her eyes never left the white chess piece representing knight. Compared with its actual role as a pocket anchor, its symbolic meaning of a symbol of friendship with Irina in her eyes was more important. Only Ron was still mumbling something, like they can all hold it individually. Why do the three of us hold a pocket anchor together? But neither Lin nor the others cared. Then, Lin called out the next name, Astoria Greengrass. Lin smiled and nodded to Astoria, who walked over somewhat flattered. Lin said softly, Astoria, I already know what you and Irving did during the summer vacation, and I support your approach. In addition, as a solid force in our team, I think you deserve it. As he said that, Lin handed a white chess piece representing the Royal Guards to Astoria. Thank you, Lin. Astoria put on a beautiful smile, and she took the white chess piece. It is Milner, and it is also the honor of the Greengrass family. Lin nodded slightly, and he continued to call out, Andy River, Elsa Jones. Hearing Lin's words, everyone was a little curious. If Harry, Ron and Hermione were called up together because they were all Irina's original partners, and they were inseparable, and their coordinates were basically not scattered, then why were Andy and Elsa called up together? It was not until everyone saw Andy and Elsa interlocking their fingers in the same way as Lin and Irina, when they walked in front of Lin, that they suddenly realized what was going on. Are you together? Lin looked at Andy and Elsa. Hearing this, Andy and Elsa smiled at each other and nodded to Lin. Andy smiled and said, after the Battle of the Department of Mysteries, I confessed to Elsa at her birthday party. Facts have proved that she really has me in her heart, as I was the only Hogwarts classmate invited to her birthday party held by her family. Elsa's face turned red, and she said coquettishly to Andy. Lin asked with interest, it seems that you met her parents that day? Hearing Lin's words, Andy suddenly looked embarrassed, and he stammered, well, her father almost beat me to death that day. A burst of good-natured laughter suddenly broke out in the room. Looking at the embarrassed Andy and Elsa, Lin took out the chess piece representing the Royal Guards, and said with a smile, then I bless you. This is your chess piece. Whether it is Andy's explosion spell or Elsa's healing magic, it is worth this pocket anchor point. Take it. Andy and Elsa looked at each other again. Andy smiled and walked forward, took the pocket anchor point, waved his right hand beside his head, made a chic salute gesture, and said, "Thank you for your blessing." After Andy and Elsa went back, Lin called out the names of Luna, Draco, Cedric and Ginny in turn, and handed them a white chess piece representing the royal guards respectively. At this point, except for the remaining white chess piece representing the royal guards that has not found an owner, the remaining 15 chess pieces have their own owners. After indicating that everyone has completed the binding with the pocket anchor points in their hands, Lin let them leave. The door of the room of requirement closed again. Irina looked at the last chess piece representing the royal guards in Lin En's hand and asked, "Who are you going to give this last pocket anchor to?" Lin En said softly, "In the past 6 months of the illusion test, the tasks I asked the alchemy detector, to generate for an evil world to kill snake monsters with swordsmanship, even weakened versions of the basilisk. Next, I will find an opportunity for Neville to collide with Nagini, who was made into a Horcrux. If Neville can successfully kill Nagini, then this last royal guards will naturally belong to him." Lin En said so. At the same time, on the edge of the British wizarding world, in an uninhabited forest, there is a small village here, and unlike traditional wizard settlements, all wizards in this village have another identity, that is, werewolves. Among these werewolves, some are descendants of werewolves, but more are werewolves who have been infected and turned into werewolves. Discriminated by wizards, they gradually began to hate wizards and even hoped to infect more wizards into werewolves like themselves and receive the same treatment as themselves. These werewolves with extreme personalities eventually gathered in this werewolf village, and the leader of these werewolves was Fenrir Greyback. Fenrir Greyback may be the cruelest werewolf in the magic world. Fenrir Greyback made it his goal to bite and infect as many people as possible. He wanted to create enough werewolves to conquer wizards, so he specialized in biting children. Fenrir Greyback once said that he would bite them when they were young, so that they would grow up away from their parents and grow up with hatred for normal wizards. This werewolf village is the result of Fenrir Greyback. In a room in the center of this werewolf village, 3 people sat around a table. One of them was Fenrir Greyback, the leader of these werewolves, and the other was August Rookwood, who was sent by Voldemort to recruit werewolves and other races. As for the last person at the table, from his pale face, sharp teeth and other appearance features, it is not difficult to see that he is a vampire. At this time, someone will ask, doesn't Rookwood want to recruit creatures such as trolls? What about the leader of the trolls? Exclamation mark. In fact, the IQ of trolls is even lower than that of the giant spider. Not long after contacting the leader of a troll colony, Rookwood couldn't stand the other's stupidity and the stench on his body, and gave up the plan to recruit trolls. Chapter 693 Realize Arm Shop! Exclamation mark. Anyway, with the 8-eyed giant spiders, whose magic resistance is also quite high, and whose number exceeds the trolls by who knows how many times, as meat shields and cannon fodder, it doesn't matter whether there are races like trolls that kill 1000 enemies and lose 800 of themselves. After all, the 8-eyed giant spiders are not like the trolls. They don't know whether they can hit the enemy with a wooden stick, but the friendly troops at their feet can definitely sweep down a whole area. Rookwood, all the werewolves I can summon are in this village, a total of 895 people. Greyback looked at Rookwood coldly and said so. Although the werewolves in this village are less than 4 digits, don't forget that there are only tens of thousands of wizards in the entire British wizarding world. The fact that there are 895 werewolves is a result of Greyback's crazy infection of young wizards over the years. Rookwood nodded slightly. He said appreciatively, "The Dark Lord will appreciate your efforts, Greyback. The future that the Dark Lord promised to werewolves will be realized after we capture Hogwarts Castle and the Ministry of Magic." Greyback said lightly, "As long as the Dark Lord can keep his promise, after he rules the British wizarding world, he will send 200 little wizards under the age of 5 to the werewolf village for infection every year. The werewolves will always be loyal to the Dark Lord." Rookwood looked at the pale vampire and asked, "Fabrizio, how many people have you vampires gathered?" Hearing this, the vampire named Fabrizio showed a bitter smile. He said, "There are a total of 372 vampires who are willing to join the Dark Lord's great plan." Rookwood frowned. Obviously, the number reported by Fabrizio did not meet his expectations. Rookwood asked, why are there so few? Fabrizio smiled bitterly and said, you know, the status of vampires in the British wizarding world is not as low as that of werewolves. Perhaps it is because vampires do not infect people by biting, and most vampires who have integrated into the wizarding society can restrain their desire to suck human blood by sucking animal blood. This makes wizards and vampires get along very well, and naturally they have no reason to rebel against those wizards and join the great plan of the Dark Lord. You know, the benefits promised to us by the Dark Lord are dispensable to them. Fabrizio said so. According to the agreement between Fabrizio and Voldemort, after the vampires help Voldemort capture the Ministry of Magic and Hogwarts Castle, and successfully become the master of the British wizarding world, Voldemort will allow vampires to suck the blood of muggles at will. Vampires will be able to enter the muggle world at will, and feed on those muggles, and will no longer be restricted by the British Ministry of Magic, nor will they need to use animal blood to restrain their desire to suck human blood. This is very tempting to Fabrizio, and the same is true for those vampires who hide in the mountains and forests, and have to flee everywhere under the pursuit of auras, in order to secretly suck the blood of some muggles. Therefore, Fabrizio finally gathered these vampires wanted by the British Ministry of Magic, and brought them to this village. The 372 people he mentioned are the number of these vampires. Hearing Fabrizio's explanation, Rookwood nodded helplessly and promised, as long as you can serve the Dark Lord, the future promised by the Dark Lord will definitely be realized. Of course, it will only be realized in you, and those who are unwilling to submit to the Dark Lord will become enemies. Fabrizio nodded indifferently. Those vampires who are unwilling to join them, even if they are of the same race, what does the fate of those same races have to do with them? Rookwood said softly, in the next 6 months, I want you to stay dormant in this village and develop your power. In June, when the students in Hogwarts Castle have finished their final exams and both professors and students are in the most slack and relaxed state, it is time for us to launch a general attack. Christmas, the Burrow. What? Say it again. Lin, who was invited, widened his eyes and looked at Fred and George, who also rushed back from the French magic world with an unbelievable look. Irina, who was standing next to Lin, also had dilated pupils and looked shocked. Fred nodded seriously and said, that's right, Lin, we plan to open a shop in Diagon Alley, but we need your help to get a legal business license from the Ministry of Magic. Ron, who was sitting next to the table, asked suspiciously, where will you get the money to open a shop? George chuckled and said, dear little Ron doesn't need to worry about that. Any old chemical equipment we sell for practice can be sold for thousands of galleons, not to mention the money to rent a shop. Even if we want to buy 3 or 4 shops, it will be no problem. Irina was too tired to complain. She said helplessly, Ron, the point is whether they have the money to open a shop. The point is that they are not opening a joke shop, but an arms shop. Yes, after returning from the French magic world to apprentice, the shop that Fred and George planned to open in Diagon Alley was not Wheeleyes Wizard Wheezes in the original book, but Wheeleyes Arms Shop. Lin finally calmed himself down. He asked calmly, can I know what your purpose is in opening an arms shop? Hearing this, Fred and George looked at each other. Fred said, we heard about the goblin all-chemical weapons from the Daily Prophet. George said, the prototypes of those weapons are all muggle guns. Our teacher gave us a lot of guns as self-defense weapons. Fred continued, so we plan to develop some all-chemical weapons based on guns, so that the wizards in the British magic world will not be at a loss when facing those goblin guns. George said softly, we will refine some all-chemical heavy weapons and only accept purchases from the Ministry of Magic. At the same time, we will refine some all-chemical pistols and other light weapons, so that the people in the British magic world can defend themselves. Lin looked at the two of them steadily. He didn't expect that they could have so many wonderful ideas. But, Lin said, you should also understand what the consequences will be if people are allowed to possess these lethal weapons. Even though the power of the all-chemical firearms made by Fred and George would certainly not be as great as that of the demon-level alchemist Arnold, it would definitely not be much worse. If everyone could legally own a gun, the current American Muggle world would be the future British Wizarding world. Chapter 694, Mechanical Soldier Number 1, Accountability by McCusa. Fred shrugged and said, "Of course we have considered these." George echoed, "So, except for the alchemical heavy weapons sold to the Ministry of Magic, which use alchemical shells, alchemical bullets and other alchemical ammunition, all other alchemical weapons sold to the public use spells as ammunition." Hearing what Fred and George said, Harry, who was not far away, asked curiously, "Using spells as ammunition?" Not only Harry, but also Ron and Hermione were curious. However, Mrs. Weasley looked worried. She knew that her child had learned from the famous French alchemist Wallace and Green, and had acquired powerful alchemical attainments. But after learning that they were going to open an arms shop, Mrs. Weasley's first thought was to stop them. It was not until Fred and George showed their strength to Mrs. Weasley, and proved that they were able to protect themselves, that Mrs. Weasley gave up the idea of stopping them. Fred chuckled and said, "That's right. After wizards pull the trigger of alchemical weapons will automatically absorb the magic power in their bodies, generate spells, and fire from the muzzle." George continued, "Depending on the different types of guns people buy, the bullets will also take on different forms such as disarming spells, stunning spells, full body binding spells, cutting spells, crushing spells, and explosive spells." Hermione questioned, "If the bullets of guns are just these spells, then why don't they use their own ones to fire these spells, but go to the trouble of buying these alchemical guns?" No, my little Hermione." Fred shook a finger and said, "Don't forget that some of the auras in the aura office can't even cast a complete armor charm." Hearing Fred's words, Hermione choked for a moment. How could she forget that in the long-running British wizarding world, not everyone can be as good as the members of the DA army, who can cast all kinds of combat spells like a fireworks show. The vast majority of wizards in the British wizarding world can only skillfully cast daily spells such as the levitation spell, the cleaning spell, the luminescence spell, and the kitchen spell. The number of wizards in the entire British wizarding world who can skillfully use the disarming spell is probably less than 1/10 of the total number. George spread his hands and said, "What's more, our alchemical firearms do not require wizards to chant spells or make corresponding gestures. They only need to pull the trigger and use the auxiliary aiming of the firearm to aim at the enemy." Lin said sincerely, "If that's the case, then even if an alchemical firearm can only fire one spell, it is a very useful invention for ordinary wizards and civilians." Fred smiled and said, "Isn't that right? However, the only alchemical firearms sold to the public are those with control-based spells such as the disarming spell, the stunning spell, and the full body binding spell. As for the high-powered alchemical firearms with the cutting spell, the crushing spell, and the explosive spell, we will only sell them to auras and some wizards with authoritative certification who can be sure that they will not use firearms recklessly." Fred said so. Lin nodded slightly and said softly, "In this way, the existence of Weasley's arms shop is much more reasonable." According to Fred and George's idea, the weapons of Weasley's arms shop are completely divided into two fields, military and civilian. Alchemical firearms in the military field are exactly the same as the alchemical firearms of the fairies. They are mainly composed of various alchemical ammunitions that are enough to kill wizards and can cause the greatest damage to the enemy. Alchemical firearms in the civilian field are mainly used to assist wizards in casting spells. They can help wizards easily release magic that they cannot release on weekdays, but their lethality is not high, and they only play some auxiliary roles. After all, even if there are no civilian alchemical firearms, the magic wands in the hands of wizards are all-purpose civilian alchemical firearms. As long as wizards are willing to study hard, they can also skillfully cast the spells that can be cast by civilian alchemical firearms. Give me your plan. After I read it, I will give it to old Batty for review. He will be responsible for promoting the legalization of your store." Lin said so. Hearing Lin's words, Fred and George looked at each other and clapped their hands excitedly. Fred said to George happily, "Then let's rent a shop tomorrow." George said even more excitedly, "Why rent? Just buy one. Rented shops are constrained by others after all, so it's safer to just buy them." Looking at the people who had reached an agreement, Irina shook her head and said, "Just be happy." At the same time, in London, a white man in a suit who looked no different from an ordinary person walked easily on the street. He looked around, as if he was curious about everything. This guy didn't look abnormal, but if someone looked closely, they might be able to see a series of data streams from the depths of his pupils. If there were wizards from the Magical Congress of the United States here, they would definitely be able to recognize his identity, Elebic. Unlike the mechanical single soldier test number 001, whose machine was exposed on the surface and could be easily identified as a robot, Elebic's carrier is now no different from a normal person. After Josu and other alchemists completed various data tests on mechanical soldier test number 001, and after the acceptance of the United States Magic Congress, confirming that the human alchemy experiment was completely successful, Josu and other alchemists created this body overnight. The interior of this body is no different from mechanical soldier test number 001, but its surface is covered with artificial flesh and blood. Whether it is hair, flesh and blood, organs, or smell, the appearance of this body is no different from the real human body. And this brand new mechanical soldier is also called mechanical soldier number 1 by Josu and other alchemists. As the experimenter of the ultimate test of human alchemy, the alchemy chip carrying Elebic's consciousness data was installed by Josu into this mechanical soldier number 1, and Elebic became the operator of this body. At this time, Elebic accepted the first task assigned to him by the United States Magic Congress and went to the British Ministry of Magic to question the specific process of the Wiltshire explosion incident on behalf of the United States Magic Congress. Of course, it is more of an accountability than an inquiry. Elebic stopped in front of a shabby red telephone booth, and a metal wand popped out from under his sleeve. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 695, The Calm Before the Storm. Elebic walked into the red telephone booth. He picked up the phone with his right hand and put it against his ear. However, he did not dial with his left hand. Instead, he opened his palm and pressed it on the dial pad. Invisible magic flowed into the phone through Elebic's left hand. Then, a chaotic noise came to Elebic's ear. After a while, as if some mechanism was opened, a mechanical female voice sounded. "The Ministry of Magic hopes you have a good day." Without any inquiry or inspection, a square silver badge appeared in Elebic's hand, and Elebic also entered the Ministry of Magic as the ground sank. The all-chemical analysis device on the mechanical single soldier number 1 can crack the inspection procedures of most all-chemical creations, allowing the mechanical single soldier number 1 to pass the inspection smoothly and enter the place he wants to reach. The real purpose of this all-chemical analysis device should be to forcibly crack the defense and monitoring means based on the all-chemical array of the enemy's stronghold when attacking the enemy's stronghold. When Elebic used this ability in the red telephone booth at the Ministry of Magic, he was just testing it. Yes, mechanical soldiers like Elebic were supposed to be used in war, and the reason why he was sent here was to conduct the last practical test. Unlike the simulation test in the laboratory, only by testing in a completely real situation can the most realistic results be obtained. After entering the lobby of the Ministry of Magic, Elebic came to the wand inspection area. He said in a calm tone, "Hello, my name is Elebic, a special commissioner of the Magical Congress of the United States, and I want to see your minister." Elebic stated his purpose, and then, under the guidance of the staff of the Ministry of Magic, he came to the minister's office of Voldemort. In some cases, having fewer people is also an advantage. For example, when Elebic had something to ask Old Barty, the staff here could take him directly to the minister's office without the need for extremely cumbersome reporting. A wizard from the Magical Congress of the United States? Old Barty looked at Elebic sitting opposite him calmly, but he was extremely vigilant in his heart. In his hand, he had an all-chemical instrument made by Lin, which could detect the situation of wizards who came to the minister's office. It was not only used to identify Death Eaters, but also to protect the personal safety of him as a minister. But at this moment, the all-chemical instrument in his hand did not respond at all, as if the wizard in front of him who called himself Elebic from the Magical Congress of the United States was not a living person at all, but an all-chemical creation. Ellerbick saluted gracefully to old Barty and said, "Yes, Mr. Minister, I'm here on behalf of the Magical Congress of the United States of America. I believe that Mr. Minister is also aware of my purpose." Old Barty suppressed his vigilance and asked, "Is it for the Wiltshire explosion?" Ellerbick chuckled and said, "It seems that Mr. Minister is an understanding man. Since Mr. Minister knows why I'm here, then I would like to ask Mr. Minister to give an explanation for this leak that seriously threatens the confidentiality law and hand over the culprit." Old Barty said lightly, "The Wiltshire explosion was caused by a very powerful dark wizard in the British magic world, a dark wizard named Voldemort. We are doing our best to hunt down Voldemort and his Death Eaters." Ellerbick's expression became serious, and he said, "But you didn't catch this dark wizard, did you?" Now, the entire magic world is waiting for an explanation. If you don't object, the magical world of the United States is willing to intervene in the British magic world and help your Ministry of Magic capture the dark wizard. Hearing what Ellerbick said, old Barty's expression turned cold. Old Barty said in a cold voice, "Don't worry, MACUSA. This dark wizard has the power of a Demon King level wizard. I think that before the MACUSA gives birth to a Demon King level wizard, MACUSA cannot provide effective assistance." After learning that Voldemort was a Demon King level wizard, countless data streams flashed in Ellerbick's eyes, and in the next moment, the MACUSA, far across the Atlantic Ocean, received this information. Ellerbick said calmly, "However, the auras of the American Magic Congress can help your Ministry of Magic to eliminate the forces under the command of the Dark Wizard, or at least arrest the Dark Wizard faster." Old Barty stood up and said in an unquestionable tone, "Thank you for the kindness of the American Magic Congress, but the British Ministry of Magic will not accept any intervention from outside forces. If you have nothing else to do, please excuse me." Ellerbick's expression suddenly turned cold. He stood up and said indifferently, "In this case, please don't regret it, Mr. Minister. After Voldemort and the Death Eaters recruited the allies they wanted, they stopped all their actions in the British wizarding world, which gave the British wizarding world a false impression that everything was over and everything was peaceful. But after so many things, no matter how stupid the people in the British wizarding world were, they understood that it was not, that things were really over, but that the biggest storm was still brewing. This made everyone feel uneasy. They couldn't imagine how terrifying it would be when the biggest storm broke out. Exclamation mark. The British magic world is now in a state of impending storm. Diagon Alley and other wizard gathering places are no longer as prosperous as they used to be. In this quiet time before the storm, people have restrained their smiles of the past. After the Christmas holiday, when Hogwarts Castle opened, Irina signed up for the apparition course. Of course, signing up for the apparition course is just a process. Irina has already mastered all the theoretical knowledge of apparition. She is only short of the last practice to be able to perform apparition skillfully. After all, the any portkey made by Irina is a combination of apparition and portkey. Not only that, Irina also applied to the Ministry of Magic through Professor McGonagall to take the Newt's exam in advance, which was supposed to be taken at the end of the 7th year. She plans to graduate in the same year as Lin. Irina was not worried about whether her application would be approved. After all the twists and turns, the application would eventually fall into the hands of old Barty. As the first application for early graduation from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, it was natural for the minister, old Barty, to make the decision. While Irina was taking the apparition course and mastering it thoroughly, the training of the DA army was also proceeding in an orderly manner. The magic level of the new members was rapidly approaching that of the old members. Even the weakest DA army member had the magic level equivalent to that of the weakest aura. Chapter 696, Killing the Snake Monster in the Navi Fantasy, and Getting the Opportunity of That Memory. It can be said that once these DA army members graduate, as long as they are willing to work in the Ministry of Magic and join the Aura office, they will be elite auras per capita. Lin and Irina were not surprised by this. After all, they have always regarded the DA army as the future wizard army of the British wizarding world. It is not surprising that the combat effectiveness of soldiers is stronger than that of the police. Days passed one by one, and soon it was March. A touch of spring appeared in the corner of Hogwarts Castle, and the ice and snow gradually melted, which finally made the heavy atmosphere of Hogwarts Castle have some vitality. After the Christmas holiday, Lin once again applied to Dumbledore for the right to use the Quidditch field as a venue for the DA Army assembly. Today's DA Army has long been put on the surface, which also means that in addition to the internal meetings and lectures of the DA Army, the DA Army's assemblies no longer need to hide in the small room of request. At this time, more than 200 illusion arrays were spread out in the Quidditch field. Every young wizard of the DA Army was in his own illusion array, waving his wand and honing his magic skills. Lin and Irina were standing in the stands. More than 200 magic screens appeared in front of them, corresponding to the illusions of the more than 200 young wizards of the DA Army. Lin and Irina's eyes were both fixed on Neville's illusion test. Unlike the illusion tests of other young wizards, in Neville's illusion test, he lost his wand and replaced it with a sharp silver sword. Not far from Neville was a huge basilisk. That's right, it was the basilisk that Lin and Irina dealt with 4 years ago. However, compared with the basilisk in its heyday, the eyes of the basilisk in front of Neville seemed to have been blinded, leaving only 2 bloody holes. The injury to the eye made the basilisk look more aggressive. After sensing Neville's breath, it became restless and seemed to be using its own perception to explore Neville's specific location. It can be seen that once the basilisk gets Neville's specific location, what awaits Neville is a fierce attack like a storm. A blind basilisk. Fortunately, even if the blind basilisk is more aggressive, it is better than me attacking with my eyes closed. Neville looked at the basilisk in the distance and said softly. In the previous illusion test, Neville had fought with this blind basilisk, but the size of the basilisk he defeated before was not as big as the one in front of him. The size of the basilisk generated for him by the illusion test seemed to be gradually increasing. The size of the basilisk he defeated for the first time was not much different from some ordinary large snakes. But now, what he wants to defeat is the same size as the basilisk that Lin En and Irina defeated back then. Neville didn't hesitate. He held the silver sword in both hands and rushed towards the basilisk as usual. As Neville moved, the sound of footsteps allowed the basilisk to instantly lock onto Neville's specific location. The next moment, a huge snake tail swung towards Neville. Facing a snake tail that was taller than him, Neville was not panicked at all. He stomped his right foot on the ground, and a strong magic power exploded between his right foot and the ground with his mind, pushing his body into the air. Neville flipped over the snake tail and landed on the basilisk again. Neville ran forward along the basilisk's body before the basilisk could react, and the silver sword in his hand pierced into the basilisk's body with all his strength. As Neville's body moved forward, a longer and longer cut was made on the basilisk. It was unknown what material this silver sword was made of, but it could ignore the basilisk's scales that were harder than steel. Without the help of this silver sword, Neville would have no chance of defeating the basilisk. Hiss, the basilisk whistled in pain, and it swung its body violently, trying to throw Neville off. Wingardium Leviosa. When Neville was thrown into the air by the basilisk, he chanted a spell loudly, and the wandless floating spell controlled the silver sword to fly out of the air and pierce the basilisk's 7 inches. The sharp silver sword pierced the scales of the basilisk and pierced into the flesh of the basilisk. The 7 inches were pierced, and the basilisk immediately rolled on the spot in pain and struggled. Outside the illusion, Lin and Irina watched all this calmly. The silver sword in the real world naturally does not have the function of piercing the scales of the basilisk. Even the Gryffindor Holy Sword cannot do this. The reason why the silver sword in Neville's illusion test is so sharp is that the alchemy detector gave it the performance when it generated this prop. According to the game, ignoring the defense of the basilisk's scales is the entry of this silver sword. It seems that Neville's level is almost the same. Irina said softly. She watched Neville in the illusion cast the levitation spell again, drew out the silver sword, and cut off the snake head of the basilisk with another sword. Lin smiled and said, "Of course. I will use the vision sharing of the soul charm to find the whereabouts of Nagini. After I find Nagini, I will let Neville kill her." However, after Lucius Malfoy killed half of the Death Eaters with the alchemical shells, many Death Eaters whose vision was stolen by my soul charm also died, which made me lose a lot of vision that could have been shared. The remaining Death Eaters are scattered in various places in the British wizarding world. Only a part of them are hiding in that unknown manor with Voldemort. It is not easy to find Nagini, who left the manor alone, and get her exact coordinates. Lin said so. Lin used the vision sharing of the soul charm to patiently look for an opportunity to catch Nagini. On the other hand, Harry also found an opportunity to get that memory from Sloane. Since Harry's first attempt on Sloane had been much more wary of Harry, which made it difficult for Harry to find an opportunity to attack. On this day, a letter from Hagrid gave Harry a new opportunity. Dear Harry, Ron, Hermione, Aragog died last night. Harry, Ron, you have seen Aragog and know how special it is. Hermione, I know you will like it too. I would be very happy if you could come to the funeral tonight because it means a lot to me. I plan to hold the funeral at dusk today, which is Aragog's favorite time of the day. I know you are not allowed to come out so late, but you can use the invisibility cloak. I didn't want to make this request, which seemed a bit excessive, but I can't face it alone. Faithful Hagrid. After seeing Hagrid's letter, Harry's eyes lit up. I can invite Professor Sloane to attend the funeral together, Harry said. He is so greedy that he will not give up the opportunity to take the potion materials from Aragog. This is the only way I can talk to him. Chapter 697, Burying Aragog, the new king of the colorful Acromanthus. After Lin and Irina told Dumbledore that Voldemort had made 7 Horcruxes, Dumbledore no longer needed Sloane's memory as urgently as he had originally wanted. After all, the purpose of that memory was no longer to provide information, but only to prove it. In addition, Harry was immersed in the training of the illusion test, and the visible improvement in his strength gave him great satisfaction, which made Harry forget the task of obtaining this memory. Until the letter sent by Hagrid, Harry found this opportunity. But, Hermione said calmly, you also know how wary Professor Sloane is of you. He thinks you are an old fox like Professor Dumbledore. Ron grabbed his messy hair and said, not to mention, Lin's alchemy array has raised the school's defense measures by more than 1 level. I'm afraid your invisibility cloak can't escape the detection of the alchemy array. Harry smiled and said, Lin knows about the task of obtaining this memory. I just need to tell Lin my plan. He will give me the permission to pass the alchemy array. As for Professor Sloane, Harry took a small bottle out of his pocket. Seeing this small bottle, Ron and Hermione's eyes lit up. Felixie. Harry nodded and said, I think it's time for me to use it. This bottle of Felixie was taken from Professor Sloane and used on Sloane. It makes sense, right? Before dusk, the 3 of them went to the Quidditch field again and entered the illusion array. They also signed up for this year's apparition course. At their request, they practiced apparition in the illusion these days. The biggest advantage of practicing apparition in the illusion is that they will not be injured by the phenomenon of separation. After all, their bodies in the illusion are constructed by all chemical detectors. Soon, after Sloane's potion class in the afternoon, the sun set over the treetops of the Forbidden Forest, and dusk arrived. Harry raised the small bottle of Felix Felicis, scooped a small spoonful of Felix Felicis, and put it in his mouth. How does it feel? Hermione asked in a low voice. Harry did not answer, closing his eyes and feeling the Felix Felicis sliding down his esophagus into his body. He didn't feel anything at first, but as time went on, an extremely exciting feeling slowly but surely flowed to his whole body, as if unlimited opportunities had come to him. Harry felt that he could do anything he couldn't do before. I know, I'm going to see Hagrid now, Harry said, putting on his invisibility cloak and heading out the door. Harry successfully reached the entrance hall and saw that Filch had forgotten to lock the castle door, and the alchemical circle that was originally shining with golden light seemed to have temporarily dimmed. Harry smiled and opened the castle door, breathing in the fresh air and the smell of grass, and walked down the steps slowly and firmly into the twilight. For some reason, when Harry walked to the bottom of the steps, he thought he should go to the vegetable garden. The fragrance there would definitely make him feel very comfortable. Although it was not completely on the way, Harry knew that he should follow this impulse, so he immediately set his feet and walked towards the vegetable garden. After Harry arrived at the vegetable garden, he was happy, but not surprised to find Sloane talking to Professor Sprout in the vegetable garden. He hid behind the low stone wall and listened to their conversation. Thank you so much for your trouble, Pomona, Sloane said politely. Most authorities agree that this medicine is most effective when picked at dusk. Oh, I agree, Sprout said enthusiastically. Is that enough? Enough, enough. Sloane thanked him repeatedly, and Harry saw him holding a large handful of leaves. Each of my third year students can get a few leaves, and there will be some left over to prevent anyone from overcooking them. Well, good night to you, and thank you again. Professor Sprout walked towards the greenhouse in the deepening dusk, while Sloane walked towards where Harry was hidden. Harry suddenly had an urge to show up, and he pulled off the invisibility cloak. Good evening, Professor. Harry looked at Sloane with a smile and said happily. Instead, Sloane was startled. He looked at Harry in shock and asked, "Oh my god, Harry, you scared me. How did you get out of the castle?" It seemed that Sloane was really scared. He stopped calling Merlin and called God instead. Harry happily told Sloane about Aragog's funeral and then pretended to talk to himself. Aragog is dead. I'm afraid the venom in his body can only be buried underground with his rotten body. Hearing Harry's words, Sloane's eyes lit up. The venom of the acromantula is very precious. If the beast had just died, the venom might not have dried up yet. It seems too wasteful not to collect it. Maybe a pint of venom can be worth 100 galleons. To be honest, my salary is not high. Sloane muttered to himself. He looked at Harry and said, "Harry, would Hagrid be happy to see the others come? The fish is hooked." Harry grinned and said, "Of course, Professor, if you want to go, Hagrid might be happy. We can give Aragog a more solemn farewell." For the venom of the acromanthus spider worth hundreds of gold galleons, Sloane accepted Harry's invitation without hesitation. After taking the Felix Felicis, Harry looked much smarter. With just a few words, he succeeded in getting Sloane to follow him to see Hagrid. If it were in the past, Sloane would probably begin to doubt Harry's intentions. But this time was different, because this time it was not Harry who made the invitation first, but Sloane himself, who was greedy for the venom of the acromanthus spider and had the wrong idea. Harry and Sloane met Hagrid smoothly and completed Aragog's funeral. The only thing that surprised them was that when they took away Aragog's body, the hundreds of acromanthus spiders around seemed to follow a stronger acromanthus spider with a colorful sheen. However, they didn't care about that. Hagrid buried his spider, and Sloane got the venom he wanted. Now the only one who hadn't achieved his goal was Harry. Chapter 698. That bowl will always be empty forever. Unlike the movie, where he looked like he was drinking fake wine after taking Fueling Erguotao, Harry felt that he already had an idea to get that memory, and he was confident that his method would be successful. After the funeral, Harry, Hagrid and Sloane returned to Hagrid's hut. Hagrid and Sloane drank together, while Harry sat aside and watched everything quietly. Soon, Hagrid and Sloane were drunk, and Hagrid fell headfirst on the wooden table, snoring deafeningly. Harry finally stood up, walked over, and sat down in front of Sloane. Sloane looked drunk. He looked into Harry's emerald green eyes, and seemed to see another young girl through Harry. He whispered, "You know, Harry, I had a fish called Francis. It was very precious to me, very precious. But one day, I went downstairs, and found it gone. It was gone. It's weird, isn't it? But I think that's life. You live well. But suddenly, it's gone, gone, gone." Sloane whispered, and Harry saw a tear in his eyes. Although Sloane didn't say it explicitly, Harry could guess that this fish was probably related to himself. No, it should be said that it was related to his mother. Harry didn't speak, but continued to stare at Sloane in front of him with his emerald green eyes. Sloane, who was still drunk, continued, "Francis was given to me by a student. It was in the spring, and that afternoon I found a bowl on my desk. The water in the bowl was very shallow, only a few inches high, with a petal floating on it. I just looked at it for a few seconds, and the petal began to sink. When it was almost to the bottom, the petal suddenly changed. It turned into a small fish. It was a wonderful magic. It was breathtaking. That lily petal was given to me by Lily, your mother, the day I went downstairs. The day the bowl was empty. Your mother also. Harry, I know why you came here, but I can't tell you. If I tell you, it's over." Sloane wiped the tears from the corners of his eyes. He looked at Harry's face carefully, and he said, choked. Looking at Sloane, who lost his composure in front of him, Harry said softly, "Professor, do you know why I survived? Look at my forehead. The night I left the scar. It was all because of her, because she sacrificed herself, because she refused to leave me alone. Because of her love, she defeated Voldemort. Harry pointed to the lightning scar on his forehead, and his voice became more and more sonorous. Harry stood up and said seriously, Professor, we can defeat Voldemort. We will definitely be able to defeat Voldemort. Voldemort is no longer as scary as he was back then, right? But we must know what Tom Riddle asked in your office many years ago, and what you said. Harry stared at Sloane's face, and said in a deep voice. Sloane just kept shaking his head in fear and kept silent. Harry's tone became lighter again, and he said softly, Professor, please be brave, like my mother. Otherwise, you will be sorry for her. Otherwise, her death will be in vain. Otherwise, that bowl, the bowl containing Francis, will always be empty, forever, forever. Listening to Harry's words, Sloane's thoughts seemed to return to more than 10 years ago, to the girl who gave him Francis, the genius potion girl from the Muggle world. Sloane's lips kept trembling, and his mind was in a struggle. His right hand was shaking and raised. For a long time, Sloane looked at Harry's emerald green eyes that were exactly the same as Lily's, and said in a slightly trembling tone, begging, please, don't think too badly of me, after you see it. You don't know what he was capable of at that time. Sloane put the wand against his forehead with his right hand, and slowly pulled out a silver white silk thread, and put it in a small glass test tube. The principal's office. Dumbledore calmly looked at Lin and Irina who were sitting opposite him, and said, I've read the memories that Harry brought back, and we can confirm that Voldemort made 7 Horcruxes. In that case, the remaining Horcruxes are definitely the snake and Harry. Lin said calmly, using the vision stolen by the soul charm, I roughly figured out the activity pattern of the snake. I'm sure I can catch the snake within 7 days. I will use the snake as a test for Neville. Dumbledore asked with interest, test? Like the test of Draco? Lin shook his head and said, no, Draco's test is to prove his position. Only if he destroys Voldemort's Horcruxes with his own hands, can he ensure that he is completely on the opposite side of Voldemort. Of course, after Lucius killed half of the Death Eaters, they have already done this. As for the test I gave Neville, in fact, this is an assessment of whether he can become the successor of the DA army. You know, Professor Dumbledore, Irina and I can't stay in Hogwarts Castle. Harry also has the ambition to become an Auror. As for Irving and Astoria, they are destined to become Demon Lord level wizards, so they will naturally not stay in the DA army. Among the remaining candidates, Neville has both the courage of Gryffindor and the loyalty and kindness of Hufflepuff. After we leave Hogwarts Castle, Neville is the best candidate to stay in the castle and develop future members of the DA army. After all, Neville's employment goal is to stay in the castle as a professor of herbology, isn't it? Lin said so. Letting Neville kill Nagini is naturally not Lin's bad taste. To see the original famous scene, Lin is not that bored. Letting Neville become famous for killing Nagini and become the future leader of the DA army is his real purpose. The successor of the DA army. Dumbledore looked at Lin and Irina with deep eyes. The current members of the DA army will become independent figures in the British magic world in the future, and the future DA army will naturally start to be cultivated in the magic school of Hogwarts. If Neville is allowed to lead the future DA army and train more young wizards, Dumbledore will be able to rest assured. Neville is brave, loyal, kind, and has no rampant ambitions. Letting Neville lead the future DA army will make Dumbledore feel more at ease than letting Lin and Irina lead it. Chapter 699, Neville vs. Nagini. As Voldemort's Horcrux, Nagini was always with Voldemort, under his protection. Voldemort allowed Nagini to leave Avery Manor and go hunting in the nearby Primeval Forest for a few hours a week, which was Voldemort's preference for Nagini. After all, even the Death Eaters in Avery Manor were not allowed to leave Avery Manor before Voldemort led them to attack Hogwarts Castle. They were forced to practice the method of plundering the power of the stars to prepare for the war. Fortunately, except for the Hufflepuff's Gold Cup, Lin and Irina destroyed Voldemort's other Horcruxes in secret, and Voldemort did not know that his Horcruxes had been destroyed except for Nagini and Harry Potter, who he did not even know. Voldemort naively thought that the only Horcrux he had discovered was the Hufflepuff's Gold Cup. Otherwise, Voldemort would never let Nagini leave Avery Manor, giving Lin an opportunity. A week after Harry got the memory from Sloane, Lin caught Nagini in a primeval forest 15 kilometers away from Avery Manor, and after temporarily controlling her with the full body binding spell, he apparated her to the forbidden forest of Hogwarts. In fact, if Lin was willing to conduct a carpet search, he might not be able to find the location of Nagini through him, and find the coordinates of Avery Manor. After all, Avery Manor was not protected by the Fidelius charm. But that would be too time consuming. Besides, he couldn't really kill Voldemort before all the Horcruxes were destroyed, so there was no need for him to do that. Irina, go call Neville over. Lin landed on his feet, and after casting a few full body binding spells at Nagini on the ground, he said to Irina, who had been waiting for a long time. Irina nodded slightly, and she threw a sword over. It was the sword of Gryffindor. Ever since Lin and Irina killed the basilisk and pulled the sword of Gryffindor out of the sorting hat, the sword of Gryffindor has been kept in the principal's office. It was not until Lin found the trace of Nagini and was ready to kidnap her that Irina went to the principal's office and borrowed the sword of Gryffindor from Dumbledore, letting Neville use it when he completed the assessment. Lin took the sword of Gryffindor and he looked at Nagini, who was lying on the ground and unable to move. With a wave of his wand, an illusion array was created with Nagini's position as the center. Of course, this is not a complete illusion array. It does not give the person who enters the array a complete illusion, but changes the person's cognition, just like twisting the big snake Nagini in front of him into the appearance of the big snake that originally existed in the Forbidden Forest. This is also to make the appearance of Nagini in Neville's eyes more reasonable. Lin En flipped his left hand, and the alchemical detector appeared in his hand. Under the scanning of the alchemical detector, the data of the Gryffindor sword and Nagini were recorded into the illusion array. When Neville walked into the illusion array, Nagini in his eyes would turn into another poisonous snake, and the Gryffindor sword in his eyes would turn into the same silver sword as the one he had experienced in the illusion test. After about 15 minutes, Neville walked over with some uneasiness under the leadership of Irina. Come on, Neville. Lin En waved to Neville calmly and said, I think Irina has already told you what happened? Neville nodded a little nervously and said, well, Irina said that you plan to choose me as a successor of the DA army, but, can I really do it? Lin En smiled and said, believe in yourself. Of course you can. Come forward, Neville. Just like the illusion test you have taken in the past 6 months. Use the silver sword in your hand to kill the big snake. This is your test. Neville looked at the center of the illusion array, the big snake that could not move. Neville wiped the sweat from his palms, nodded vigorously, and stepped into the illusion array. Neville's mind was full of what Lin En and Irina said about the test that made him the successor of the DA army, but he did not notice that he could still see the big snake outside the illusion, even though he had not stepped into the illusion array just now. The moment Neville stepped into the illusion array, everything in front of him changed. Under the cognitive modification of the illusion array and the alchemy detector, Neville felt as if he was in a huge arena, and a huge, patterned venomous snake was entrenched not far from him. Outside the illusion array, Lin threw the Gryffindor holy sword in his hand and made it stick into the soil at Neville's feet. In the illusion array, Neville only saw a silver sword appear out of thin air and stick at his feet. He pulled out the silver sword and looked at the big snake in the distance with a look of fighting intent. Stop the spell. Outside the illusion array, Lin gently shook the magic wand in his hand and lifted the whole body binding spell on Nagini. After the binding was lifted, Nagini immediately showed its ferocity. Its thick and long snake body suddenly popped out and rushed straight to Neville's face. Neville subconsciously dodged to the side, dodging Nagini's ejection, and swung a sword at Nagini's 7 inches. The threat of death made Nagini nervous. It twisted its body in the air, trying to avoid Neville's Gryffindor sword, but Neville's Gryffindor sword followed Nagini's body twisting and constantly changed the angle of the sword. In the end, the Gryffindor sword brushed past Nagini's 7 inches. Although it did not hit Nagini directly, it also left a nearly 1 meter long cut on its body. Scarlet blood splashed out, dyeing the soil of the Forbidden Forest red. The sudden pain made Nagini scream in pain several times, and the murderous intent in her eyes became even worse. Fearing the Gryffindor sword in Neville's hand, Nagini did not dare to get close to Neville for a while. But this did not mean that Nagini had no other means of attack. It opened its mouth wide, and a ball of snake venom with a fishy smell actually sprayed directly from its mouth, heading straight for Neville's face. Under the cognitive modification of the illusion array, the venom turned into a dark purple horrible liquid in Neville's vision, which made Neville roll 2 or 3 times in a row to avoid the liquid, and then he looked at Nagini in the distance in shock. Nagini spit out venom several times in succession, but Neville dodged them all. Looking at the figure holding the Gryffindor holy sword and constantly approaching him, Nagini had no choice but to pounce and bite in the direction of Neville. Chapter 700. Nori kills the snake, the future leader of the DA army. There are many obstacles. Neville pushed forward his left palm without hesitation, and a wandless spell of obstacle came out from his palm. Nagini's snake body paused in the air, and the next moment, Neville held the Gryffindor holy sword and stabbed towards Nagini's 7 inches. Nagini's magic resistance was much higher than that of ordinary snakes. Although Neville's wandless spell of obstacle made its snake body pause in the air for a while, it could not control it for too long. Before the Gryffindor holy sword stabbed it, it suddenly broke free from the control of the obstacle spell, twisted its snake body to dodge the Gryffindor holy sword, and rushed up along Neville's arm, trying to wrap Neville's body with its snake body. But how could Neville do what Nagini wanted? Exclamation mark. The Gryffindor holy sword in Neville's right hand trembled slightly, and then flew to his left hand. He held the sword with his backhand, and stabbed the Gryffindor holy sword towards Nagini, who was wrapped around his right arm. Feeling the sharp blade, Nagini had to give up the plan to strangle Neville with her snake body. She shook her body, and flew off Neville's arm, biting Neville's thigh again. Armor. Another wandless cast of the shield charm. The invisible shield bounced off Nagini's sharp teeth. Nagini looked at Neville holding the Gryffindor sword with uneasiness. The threat posed by the other party was much higher than the auras that Voldemort ordered it to eat. On the other side, Neville's clothes were also soaked with sweat. He did not have Hermione's magical talent, and it was not so easy for him to cast spells without a wand. The previous wandless cast of the barrier charm, levitation charm and shield charm had consumed a lot of Neville's energy. Facing such a Nagini, who was not as powerful as the basilisk, but whose fighting skills were many times stronger than the basilisk, Neville did not dare to slack off. Petrify all. Taking advantage of the moment when Nagini was bounced away by him, Neville waved his left hand again and cast a wandless spell. The grey-white light hit Nagini, and Nagini's snake body was fixed in place. Seeing this, Neville's face lit up with joy. He immediately swung the Gryffindor sword and slashed at Nagini. However, Neville's magic power was not as strong as Lin's, and the power of his full body binding spell was naturally not comparable to Lin's. At the same time Neville swung the Gryffindor sword, Nagini had already broken free from the control of the full body binding spell and avoided Neville's slash. Neville did not give Nagini a chance to dodge. He swung his left hand, and a ball of flames cast by the wandless spell blocked Nagini's retreat, forcing Nagini and Neville to fight in close combat. At the same time, Neville stabbed the Gryffindor sword at Nagini's 7 inches, and another wandless barrier spell flew out from the blade of the Gryffindor sword under Neville's control. The barrier spell covered by the edge of the Gryffindor sword hit Nagini, causing her body to stagnate for a moment, but this stagnation was what killed her. The Gryffindor sword followed closely, and Neville stabbed with all his strength, piercing Nagini's 7 inches. Nagini immediately twisted and struggled on the ground in pain. The pain of being pierced in her 7 inches and the despair of losing her life made it impossible for Nagini to launch a counterattack against Neville at the last moment of her life. Wingardium Leviosa. Instead, Neville took a step back, waved his hand, and pulled out the Gryffindor sword with a floating spell, and then controlled the Gryffindor sword to chop down on Nagini, who was struggling on the ground. Just like when Neville slashed the basilisk with his sword in the illusion test, the Gryffindor sword, under the control of the floating spell, immediately cut off Nagini's snake head and flew out. Scarlet blood flowed all over the ground, staining Neville's wizard robe red. At the moment of Nagini's death, a shrill scream came from Nagini's body. That was not Nagini's voice. Along with the shrill scream, there was a more foul-smelling, ink-like liquid. Looking at this scene, Lin and Irina understood that Voldemort's penultimate Horcrux Nagini was completely destroyed. Lin waved the wand in his hand and removed the illusion array that enveloped Neville. After seeing everything clearly in front of him, including the Horcrux Nagini lying on the ground and the Gryffindor sword that flew back to his hand, after cutting off Nagini's snake head, Neville fell into a daze. "Congratulations, Neville." Lin walked over, clapped his hands lightly, and congratulated. There was some confusion in Neville's eyes. He asked, "This snake seems to be different from the one I just killed. And the sword in my hand, if I'm not mistaken, it should be the sword of Gryffindor, right?" Irina came over. She explained with a faint smile, "Yes, Neville, you are awesome. What you held is indeed the sword of Gryffindor, and what you killed is also one of Voldemort's Horcruxes." Neville's eyes widened after listening to Irina's words. He pointed at Nagini on the ground and asked in disbelief, "What? Irina, this is Voldemort's Horcrux?" Irina told Neville the whole story, including how she borrowed the sword of Gryffindor and asked Neville to destroy Voldemort's Horcruxes as a test. Lin said, "Neville, from today on, you are the leader of the DA army. Before Irina and I leave Hogwarts Castle, we will help you establish your prestige in the DA army and teach you how to manage the DA army." Neville looked at the two of them in a daze and seemed a little confused. Lin patted Neville on the shoulder. He didn't say much, but waved his wand to clean up the snake corpse on the ground, took the Gryffindor holy sword, and disappeared from the spot. After Irina sent Neville back to the castle, she also apparated to the principal's office, and Lin and Dumbledore seemed to have been waiting here for a long time. Irina came over, she picked up the black tea on the table, and drank it all. Neville successfully killed the Horcrux snake. Next, as long as we deal with the Horcrux on Harry, we can really kill Voldemort. Irina sat down on the chair and said quickly. Dumbledore nodded slightly. He looked at Lin and said, "In that case, it's time for me to give up the ownership of the Elder Wand." "Lin, when will you arrange the illusion array for Harry and me?" 3 days later, Lin said with a smile. 3 days later is the Hogsmeade weekend. By then, Irina and Harry will go to the Three Broomsticks for a couple of drinks. Irina said softly, "I will take Harry out alone and bring him to the illusion array that Lin has arranged in advance. By then, Professor Dumbledore will need you to wait in the illusion array in advance. The illusion array's ability to modify cognition will turn you into an out-and-out Death Eater in Harry's eyes." End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.